Oi! 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 Hey! Hey! Oi! 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 Oi!
Welcome, everybody. Yeah, I'm back. And tonight's stream is a little different than the kind of thing we usually do, as you could probably tell by looking at the background here. And I see chat's already populating. Oh, we got Great White North. We got L. How's it going, guys? And as usual with me tonight is Mike.
Hey, yeah.
And we also have Snarboo back.
Hello.
And we have Kate.
Hello.
So, this is not a serious stream. I think just by looking at the background, you can tell that.
Before we get too far, what's that melted skull from? It looks so fucking familiar, and I can't. It's not coming to me.
It's from the end of the Master System Ninja Gaiden.
Yes. It's been a while since I've beaten that. Yes.
Yeah, if you notice, right above him is the Outer Space Potato Man.
That I forget what that's from.
Renegade.
Oh yeah. Oh, it must have been one of the portraits in like Sabu's office or something.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm not sure how many people saw the announcement I made a couple of weeks ago. Everything is currently being evaluated. There are still streams that are going to be going through the end of October. After that, we'll see what happens from there. This was, of course, in regards to the announcement that Dyer and Betty were going on to hiatus for a while. The videos are still currently on hiatus, but the streams will keep going. That's basically what I've decided. Whether or not we shift formats away from YouTube or something else, I couldn't tell you. There's the chat. Okay.
Oh, you forgot to turn it on?
I chatted in the wrong place.
Okay.
So
that fits the shitpost nature of this roundtable, so you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I could go ahead and make it disappear again. Watch.
Oops. What
Now I'll
You have
keep
way
it up
too
on
much
top.
power, sir.
Where did it go? What is object permanence?
Yeah. I see Geeks is here too. So glad y'all could join us tonight. We're going to be doing some discussing. Each of us got together before this started up, and we decided we were going to go ahead and give our own personal hot takes on several different games. We narrowed it down to 3 each, and we're going to be doing a mix of positive and negative takes. So, and by the way, for anyone who is wondering, this background was completely me, which is showing why I will never have a future in art.
I don't know. It has good movie theater energy there, like the carpet.
I'm a writer.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's true, but I'm a writer, damn it.
Yeah. I feel the exact same. It's like when you build your character at the beginning, they can only be good at writing or good at art, but you can never have both. It's mutually exclusive. So
Yep. And if you see the kind of thing that slipped in there, if you see our muscle-bound friend Joe Piscopo up there, who's giving his thumbs up to the positives. Meanwhile, if you look at Batfleck over there on the left, who's screaming in agony over the negatives.
these are both images that Rob has used to troll me very frequently on his message board, and I'm glad they're being used for, I guess, good for once. But
You gave me the perfect opportunity.
yeah, yeah, pretty much.
And Krang there is saying, I have 205, whatever that means.
That's from a ROM hack known as Teenage Mammal Nice Chipmunks, where the turtles have been converted into vaguely Ross Bagdasarian-ish chipmunks for some reason, and Pizza Hut has been changed to Toast Hut also for some
Toast
reason.
Hut.
So.
Yeah, but I have 205. I don't get it. I'm not sure I want to get it.
If it's some obscure in-joke that the ROM hacker did, that's really the only guess I have.
Yeah. And someone may be wondering who the black and white picture is, kind of sticking his nose up over the bottom right corner there. You want to field this one, Mike?
That would be the lawyer Melvin Belli, or Belly, or however it's pronounced, who was a public figure, gained some notoriety in the Zodiac Killer case, but he also inexplicably tried his hand at acting and actually guest starred as the evil presence in one of the Season 3 Star Trek Original Series episodes. It was a bad episode, but many episodes were bad in the third season. His performance certainly did not elevate what was already a troubled script. If anything, it probably made it even worse. So,
Hey, as an actor, he's a terrific lawyer.
at least, yeah, for all that entails.
Sorry, we just had to dissect this background for people who are popping in going, what the hell?
Yep.
This is not Betty's work.
Although he seemed to be getting more praise than per usual, so I don't know. Maybe doing these much weirder collages, if everyone's okay with that, would at least fit the bill. But
Well,
we'll see.
for the record, Betty did see this and thought it was the most amazing thing she'd ever seen.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess writers can be artists, just not conventionally.
I noticed there is one character unaccounted for, and he's a little pixel dude there, all the way at the bottom.
Yes. That would be the ghost of Old Man Graves from the Atari 20th Century game Haunted House.
Ah, classic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Really good game, yeah.
long time ago on the Digital Press message board, they used to run alter ego contests. And I decided to play as Old Man Graves. And every other word out of his mouth was, "Don't touch my urn." So, of course, people would just keep messing with him. So it's like, oh, stole your urn, use it as a spittoon, a urinal, whatever. And he'd get angry and throw his bats and tarantulas around. And I see we have Gemini with us tonight. How's it going?
Hey,
All right. So, if anyone has any future questions about this ridiculous background image, then by all means, feel free to ask. So, I think then we're going to go ahead and kick things off with Mike.
Hi.
What do you got on tap for us to discuss first?
Okay, well, the nature of the hot take stream Dyer has already went over, and I have really juggled around which ones I do want to discuss. The ones that I want to discuss now were way different from the ones that I started out. And as a matter of fact, I even made a last-minute change like an hour ago, so there are so many of these I could discuss for good or for ill, but I'm going to start off the bat with a game that a lot of people love, but I only like. Might I also, establish that just because we think something is overrated does not necessarily mean we think it's bad. I mean, we might think that, but I certainly don't think that in the case of this game, which is DuckTales, a woo-oo for the NES. I know a lot of people love that one.
I'm going to interrupt you right now. Yep. You're just mad about the moon theme.
Yes, that's part of it. That's a big part of it, I'm not going to lie.
Oh my gosh.
The moon theme. Really, Mike? That's
it's the most overrated and overplayed track on the NES, except maybe for Wily Castle 1 for Mega Man 2.
Oh, I didn't hear that coming either.
What? Well, would you say there's any track in the NES that is more overrated?
No, Mike, that was sarcasm.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess they say it's hard to detect that over the internet, so...
Well, I could always quote Charlie Brown. Don't you know sarcasm when you hear it? Oh, by the way, one other thing you may or may not have noticed on the background, before we jump into this, look real closely at my avatar there.
Ah, is that guy incognito?
More like...
I must ask you a question.
Rick Incognito. Homer? Who is this Homer? I am Guy Incognito. Alright, Mike, go ahead and take things away with DuckTales, then.
Well, let's see.
You're wrong. You're dead wrong. Get out.
Okay. Well, that's... Everyone can say that if they want to. I'm just going to stick by my humble guns here.
Alright, go for it.
DuckTales in the NES, often regarded as one of the greatest NES games ever, one of the greatest licensed games ever, Disney games, what have you, and so forth. And it's one that I grew up with, and it is one that I have always certainly enjoyed. But I was always a little bit more of a fan of its sort of sister game at the time that Capcom had made, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. I know that one's a little bit more linear in a way, and roughly the two games kind of even out in playtime. Roughly they take like half an hour to beat either or, and neither are too difficult. But I don't know. DuckTales has a few structural annoyances in it, like... For some reason, the game has a real boner for the Transylvania stage. Even after you beat that one, if you go to the African mines, you need to head back to Transylvania temporarily to get a key from there to actually get into the mines. And I'm like, this is filler. Why was this put in there? Why couldn't we just go to the, why couldn't we just get into the mines right away, anyway?
See, I ran into that issue when I played it, and I had already played so much of the Transylvania stage, it only took me maybe like a minute to get through the stage, of that, like maybe closer to 30 seconds with pogoing around.
I mean, sure, but that is nonetheless time wasted, in my opinion. It didn't need to be like that, in my opinion. And also, at the risk of sounding persnickety, the fact that, you know, how the stages are laid out on the stage select screen, because you can choose whatever order you go in, but the Amazon is at the top, and that's the one that the cursor starts on. You'd think that, as per usual law in these sorts of games, that they sort of nudge you towards the Amazon being the best, most ideal stage to start on. It is one of the hardest stages of the game, and all those freaking bees, for one thing. I don't know.
You think that stage is hard?
Okay, the game overall is not especially difficult. You know, hard relative to how the rest of the game is structured, but it just annoys me. I do think that...
I have to ask. Do you think the Amazon is harder than the Himalayas, where you can't even pogo without getting stuck in the snow?
I was going to say, that's the other hardest stage, and it might be even harder, but, I mean, the Amazon is tougher than at least the African mines, arguably Transylvania, even if that one could be a bit confusing to navigate. Couldn't tell you whether or not it's harder than the moon, but I don't know. it just doesn't feel like it should be the best stage on which to start after all. That's just a really minor nitpick. Like, mechanically the game's sound and all, but like, even if it roughly runs to about the same amount of time that Chip and Dale does, for some reason the game just feels lesser to me. Like, there's some missing component in it. I feel like, I mean, it doesn't help that the end of the game is Transylvania one more time for some reason, and the final fight against Count Duckula, wherever his name was, is rather anticlimactic, in my opinion. Then again, I guess none of the bosses are especially... No, actually, I'd say Magica Dispel was maybe even a little bit more difficult. I don't know. It's a very good game. I just feel... it's not as super great as everyone says it is. It just feels like it does fall a little bit short. Like, I feel like the ending's a bit of an anticlimax. I feel like maybe it needed like one more fully original stage to really feel more complete. To note, I've never played DuckTales Remastered. Maybe I would like that version more if I ever got around to it.
I was about to ask you that, actually.
Yeah. But we're just judging I'm just judging the NES game in for of itself. Maybe I will get to remastered someday though, at least.
Before we go on, just want to say welcome Tim to the chat.
Hey Tim, what up?
Hello.
Hello.
All right, Mike, go ahead.
Well,
Let me think. Snarboo, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I agree with you on 2 points. The Amazon stage is probably not the best. Transylvania is actually, once I figured that out, I went with Transylvania, and it was a much smoother ride. I don't have that much nostalgia for the game. I only recently played it. In fact, within the past couple of months, once you mentioned that would be one of your picks. And in that light, I can see why people would actually consider it one of the toppest games of all time. But again, I don't have the nostalgia there, and it's just kind of a solid NES game to me. I also agree with you on the Moon theme, not so much that it's overrated, more that I think the composer was trying a little too hard. I feel like the Amazon theme is probably actually the best theme in the game.
Yeah, it is a catchy one. I've always kind of liked the African Mind themes quite a bit. It's kind of jazzy almost, but now the game does have really good music all around it. Who was the composer? I want to say it was Yoko Shimomura, but no, I don't think it was. Shit. This is the sort of stuff I should have researched in advance. DuckTales composer.
Well, remember, this is the Hot Takes live cat or roundtable, not the Informed Takes roundtable.
This is
No,
true.
that is a very good point, and it was Hiroshige Tonemura, although I don't know what else he's done off the top of my head. Oh, Destiny of an Emperor. That's one I should get around to. Anyway, so yeah, Snarb's not wrong. I think like a large part of my complaint is that the theme that plays for the Moon, which I'm not going to hum because when I streamed DuckTales once and I put the stream up on YouTube, I actually got copyright struck for the damn Moon theme, and I had to.
And it wasn't by Capcom either. It was Disney, because Disney used a different version of it in one of the recent DuckTales reboots. I think the most recent.
Yeah.
I will say that reboot is actually very good, and the usage of that theme was actually very good. But that still doesn't change the fact that, like, come on, is this really one of the greatest pieces of game music ever composed? I don't know. I think it just kind of swirls around in that same sort of, like, nostalgia pot that, causes people to just kind of get blinded into the more mainstream sort of aspects of the NES and how Nintendo is the greatest company ever, and it's like, I don't know.
It's a good theme, but it'll never be the greatest as long as Vampire Killer exists.
That is true, yes. Or, if I may offer an alternative for the greatest theme ever composed on the NES,
Go
the
ahead.
drawing game theme from Pictionary?
Yeah, any
That is a good one. Yeah.
Rare game has probably better music than the Moon theme.
Yeah, speaking of Fallen, also the title music for Solstice, which is just straight up freaking prog rock, and I
Yes.
love it.
Okay, so does anyone want to go ahead and rebut besides Snarb?
But
I mean,
What?
I can't really rebut it but I will say that DuckTales was actually a game that I did play as a kid, but at the same time, it was not a game that I was particularly into as a kid. I remember, I think maybe my older siblings might have watched DuckTales potentially, but it was never a cartoon that I personally got into. So when we had the DuckTales game on the NES, I just saw it as another game to play, and I never really got the hang of it. I should probably give it another try since I am a lot more skilled with games today than I was as a kid, but I remember at the time it just never really stood out to me, and I found it awkward to use the pogo stick and to deal with the mechanics. And from what I've heard of the music, it's okay. I would say the Moon theme isn't even a track that I particularly like personally. There are like hundreds of tracks on the NES I would rather listen to than the Moon theme. So that's my stance at the moment.
You can quote me on this. The first stage music to Shatterhand is better than the Moon theme. Boom.
Shatterhand's music in general rules.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. It was Iku Mizutani who was the composer for Natsume. Great shit all around. And hey, a Scroll Boss.
Yes.
What up, Prime? How's it going?
Prime's here.
Welcome.
So, all right, Mike, I'd like to take the opportunity to go ahead and give you my take on this.
Please do.
All right, well, here's the thing, though. I've invited a friend of mine to come in and rebut for me.
Uh-oh. Is it Prime? Is he a plant?
It's the duck.
Oh, I get it. Wow, I was actually a little slow to pick up on that. Jesus Christ, you're really abusing that button, sir.
Well, he had a lot to say.
Okay. My relative mild disdain of DuckTales is not a condemnation of ducks or the entire bird kingdom. I will say, though, I guess maybe a little bit of nostalgia is lost on me because I didn't grow up watching the 90s show. I actually didn't really watch very much Disney, if any, at all. As
90s?
a kid. Just a few... it was late 80s, was it?
87.
Yes, it was.
Damn it. Well, then that shows you how much attention I really paid.
Well, to get to my actual rebut now that my friend's gone, I'm a DuckTales mark. I mean, I started watching that show from the first time it aired, so it's got a lot of nostalgia for me.
Oh,
And
nice.
I do like the Moon theme. I've always liked the Moon theme. It doesn't make any playlists I usually make for, like, greatest video game music, but I don't dislike it to the degree that you do. But, you know, I think it's a solid game, and it's got a good soundtrack, and it's a permanent part of my collection, so there you go.
Yeah. That's fair. It's still a good game. It's still a good track. It's just like some people just really lose their shit over the game and the track, and I'm like, I don't know. It does not ping. It does not leave as much of an emotional resonance in my soul as it does others. But you know, if it does them, then that's cool and all. Darkwing Duck is underrated, though.
That is a good one, yes. I also lament there was never a Gummy Bears game, because that was my favorite of the Disney afternoon shows.
Wait, Gummy Bears was Disney? Really?
Yeah.
Yes, Gummy Bears. Yes.
Again, this is how little I know about Disney before, like, you know, the MCU.
Well, let me tell you this. I remember before the whole Disney afternoon thing started, there were exactly 2 cartoons on the air. Gummy Bears came first, followed by DuckTales.
I am very sorry, Prime.
There was one actually before that one, Rob.
Okay, which one was that?
I forget the name, but it was kind of Disney's take on Care Bears. It has a name. Oh gosh, what was it?
You're not talking about the Get Along Gang or something like that, are you?
It wasn't the Woozles, I don't think. I think that was a different show.
I know that. I don't remember anything Disney that actually was like their take on the Care Bears.
I need to look this up. Hold on.
Go right
It's in
ahead.
the afternoon. Sorry, I interrupted you, though, Mike. You were responding to Scroll Boss.
Oh,
Yeah.
he was just teasing me. He said, "Glad I got here late to miss most of the Ducktales." I guess I
Oh.
should also make a sidebar that I have also played and beat, actually semi-recently, but I played and beat DuckTales 2, the lesser-known sequel, and I was actually wondering if, like, that would actually feel more like a hidden gem, that I would actually like this more than the first, because I don't hear it talked about nearly as much. No, it's okay. But I don't think it necessarily surpassed the original. Like it's
I can.
eh,
I
And
can.
Scroll Boss has it. It's Wuzzles.
That was a Disney production.
Woozle Wuzzle.
Yeah,
Is that what passes for television these days?
Ladies and gentlemen, the clown show.
I had no idea that the Wuzzles was actually a Disney thing. But then I didn't really watch the Wuzzles either. So, and I see that LDP is here.
Hey, Junior, what up?
Yes, my hot takes, and everyone else's who's here. And as long as we're on this particular subject, as the artist extraordinaire here in our chat, Prime, what do you think of the background? I'm curious.
Well, while we're waiting on Scroll Boss, LVP just said, wait, is that the Bad Game Hall of Fame? Yeah, they used the trophy from Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, or whatever that game was called, as their icon. And I see the trophy right there, the three-handled trophy.
Oh, no, we've got actually a pretty varied amount of games we'll be talking about. So some you may agree with, some you may not.
In the end, we're all winner.
Fun background with unexpected Piscopo and Snyderverse. You'll have to go back and watch the beginning at some point just to hear what I'd say about it.
Yeah, and how I explained how those are both images that Rob has used to troll me specifically because I hate both. Well, everyone hates Joe Piscopo, to be fair. The Snyderverse, for some reason, has some fans, and I don't want to know any of them, but it is what it is. I am thinking now that, you know, it wasn't necessarily Ben Affleck that shitted up the role. It really was just Snyder was a bad director, but...
Okay, now we're getting off topic.
We are, yes. This isn't the superhero film takes podcast, not yet, so...
So let's say we go ahead and move on to Kate.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, my first hot take that I feel like sharing today concerns a certain game that is maybe a little bit out of the common wheelhouse that we tend to cover as far as games on these roundtables go, but I'm gonna go with Half-Life 2. So, Half-Life 2 is a game that I tried to play on several occasions, but could never get into. I first started playing Half-Life 2 in the 2000s after having previously played through and enjoyed the original Half-Life. As a follow-up, there were some things that seemed neat about Half-Life 2, like its advanced physics or whatnot, but I think its overall design is very lacking as a first-person shooter. I think much of the first half of Half-Life 2 in particular, I think, is very poorly paced. Their first few areas involve several extensive vehicle segments where you're riding on an airboat through shallow rivers and sewer tunnels. The airboat controls really awkwardly, and there are several points where you have to get off it, then do something on foot, then make your way back to the boat in order to drive off again. Pretty much every time I had to get back onto the boat, I found myself dreading. By the time the airboat section was over and done with, I was already feeling pretty tired of the game, and that's like not even the first tenth or so of the experience. So that's not a great way to start. Another thing the game introduces that I actually think is pretty neat is the gravity gun. The gravity gun is a fairly iconic weapon in Half-Life 2 that lets you grab any object in the environment and then launch it toward an enemy or other target. This can be used in pretty neat ways, like picking up a saw blade with the gravity gun and tossing it at a zombie to kill it or whatnot. I think that's cool, but there's one particular area about halfway through the game that is very gravity gun reliant in a bad way, and that is the sand traps level. A significant chunk of that stage involves you slowly making your way across a giant field of sand. The gimmick there is that if you touch the sand, you'll alert these giant antlions living in the ground, and they hit hard, they're tough to kill, and they can easily swarm you if you aren't careful. So in order to get across the sand without alerting them, you have a few planks of wood lying on the ground. The game expects you to use your gravity gun to pick up a plank of wood, plop it onto the sand, then pick up another plank of wood and drop it past the first plank, etc., essentially using the planks as makeshift platforms or a bridge in order to safely traverse the sand without alerting the antlions. But the thing is, that concept for a game obstacle is interesting for like 10 seconds. After that, it becomes very, very tedious. And you're expected to do this for several minutes on end before you finally get to the end. It felt like a massive chore, and it really killed the game's pace. I think Sand Traps is one of the worst stages I've ever had to deal with in a game. It's so bad. I will say that I think there are some neat bits in the second half of Half-Life 2. I feel like the level design picks up around then somewhat, but it still never reaches the heights of the first game as far as I'm concerned. I particularly don't like how underwhelming the Combine AI is in Half-Life 2 compared to how threatening the Marine AI was in the first Half-Life. The Combine feels like a joke to fight, compared to how the Marines in the first game constantly kept me on edge, feeling like I was fighting for my life to survive. So, overall, I think Half-Life 2 is a lackluster follow-up to the first game.
Hey, Kate, I got a question for you.
What's up?
Isn't that the game with the head crabs?
Yeah, the head crabs were first introduced in the first Half-Life, but they do appear in Half-Life 2.
See, this shows you exactly how much I know about Half-Life, which is virtually nothing.
That's fair. I figure it's probably not your kind of game anyways.
Nope.
Dyer, you want to share the reason why you really don't like first-person shooters?
Oh, I certainly can. In all honesty, I've always found them to be very mazy and confusing, and even with an in-game map, it's just like you end up running in circles over and over and over and over, trying to find the red key or whatever the hell it is you need to exit the room. And then, you feel like you're eventually going to turn a corner and just find a big piece of cheese. So it's like you're a rat in a maze. And
so despite all your rage, you are still just a rat in a maze.
God damn you! Mind taking!
I actually dig the key hunts, personally.
It depends on the game. When I get really mad, I refer to it as cunting. Yeah, key hunting, get it? Which sounds bad.
Wow.
That sounds bad, Mike. That really
Wow.
sounds bad.
I shouldn't have
Oh my
shared that
gosh.
live, but I did, so I'll shut up forever now.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
Oh,
But
boy.
sometimes it can be fun. Well, if not fun, then engaging. It depends. Snarboo, what were you gonna say? Please help me.
Yes, please, Snarb, help.
I have a lot to say about Half-Life 2 as well. Notably, I was really
Please
hyped
do.
for it. And then there was so much surrounding that game that was a disaster. You had Steam. That was the first real introduction of it. Nobody could download the game at launch.
Oh, wow.
Secondly, the game had a crippling issue known as the stutter bug that was never fixed. Computers just got faster. It was either a RAM or a processor issue. And when you were playing very early Source Engine games, you would always just get these bits where the audio would go like, if someone's talking. And that was pretty bad. But over time, I've come to appreciate it. But I agree with Kate. The pacing in that game is horrible. And they often will just have a gimmick that they introduce for like 5 levels, and then it's another gimmick. There's the back-to-back vehicle sections where it's very stop and go. The AI is dumb as bricks. There's far fewer weapons, so you're kind of ham-fisted into using the gravity gun, which I almost never do, because why would I want to even if it's funny to pick up a toilet and shoot it at a dude, I could just cap him in the head with the really good Magnum the game gives you. That is actually the best weapon in the game, and it's criminal, they only let you carry like 3 reloads for it or something, like 2. There's also a dearth of ammo. God, there's so much about the game I could go on about, but I do kind of miss that style of FPS that briefly existed. I was more of a Doom 3 and Far Cry kind of person, and Fear for that matter, but
I love Far Cry and Fear.
those are both really good games. But that style of FPS kind of died, I believe, with 2006 Prey, before moving on to the Call of Duty style. I don't know how to describe it. It's not quite hyperlinear, but it's not quite as open as, say, Doom or any of those sort of games. So I miss that aspect of it. And I really wish they would just give us the next Half-Life. I don't care what it is. It doesn't have to have Gordon in it. I don't care. I kind of miss that universe. The expansions, or the episodes, rather, the Half-Life episodes, because Valve had to start the episodic gaming thing that didn't really turn out very well. They're not very good either. So you can, if you don't like Half-Life 2, you can skip them, especially Episode 1. That is such a waste of time.
Episode 1 is real bad. I will say, though, that I actually did like Half-Life Alyx a lot. I was surprised by how much I had a good time playing through that. I definitely prefer Half-Life Alyx over the Half-Life 2 plus episodes. Though I'm not sure whether I would pick Alyx or the first game as my favorite in the series.
I wish I could play Alyx. I don't have the money for a VR setup.
I don't have the space, and I have had to limit my spending lately. So.
I just don't care.
Of course.
Well, that's
get you online,
That's very good.
I lucked up by having a friend who let me borrow his headset so I could play it.
That's nice. Well, my opinions aren't too... unless Snarboo had anything else to say.
I feel like, okay, I will say I miss physics in games. I don't like Half-Life 2's implementation of it, but you had some games around that time, like Max Payne 2 and a few others, where they really went kind of nuts with it, where everything was interactable and would just fly off the shelf. Like, it's especially noticeable in Fear, where even just shooting the walls causes all this smoke and dust particles to just shoot out. And it's so cool, and there's shells full of stuff that just get knocked around as you're, like, kneecapping dudes with the shotgun. It's great.
I have mixed feelings about the way that physics were implemented in games around the 2000s or early 2010s. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine if your character is walking next to like a shelf or a table, and then suddenly the table flies across the room and whatever's on it falls off. It feels like the opposite of how physics should be. It feels like they make them too reactive to the player, so it really throws me out of the game if I'm just walking normally and everything is falling around like as if I'm running into it at top speed. So I hate games that do that with their physics.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
I wouldn't expect you to have seen that.
All right.
If I may point out what LDP said a bit of a while ago, I feel like Half-Life 2 should have just been called Life. That's a good point.
You know what they say about life?
It sucks. Get a fucking helmet.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, my thoughts are actually very much in line with what Kate and Snarb has said. Not to turn this into an anti-Half-Life 2 circle jerk, but I liked it well enough when I first played it, but like other games that I'm just kind of meh on nowadays, it kind of sunk down in retrospect, and I feel that the first game absolutely was better. It feels like it just had a overall cooler atmosphere, a better arsenal. I actually liked the Zen levels even before the really awesome Half-Life remake Black Mesa improved them. By the way, go play that if you haven't. That's also really damn good.
I do need to play that.
Oh yes, highly recommended. But 2, for what it is a good game, but as Revolution... Well, it's an alright one. I don't know if it's
considered the best FPS anymore, but there was so much hype around it, and it
really
was so
was
disappointing to play this game. I will say I like the level design, the Eastern European sort of stuff. That was pretty cool, and it did give us some really cool Russian FPS games or Eastern European FPS games to go along with it.
Some of the game it can be seen inherently influencing the rash of Eastern European shooters that popped up over the next decade or so, and for that I do appreciate it. But something about Half-Life 2 just doesn't feel as complete as the first game. Like, it doesn't really have as much of an arc structure to it. It's more like it just kind of like keeps going and then it ends. And that boat segment is way too long, and it's like, on top of that, here, have a buggy segment, which is also really long. And, like, I think it starts out good, except for the boat segment. Like, the first half is good. I do like Ravenholm, for what that's worth, at least. But the latter half of the game kind of feels like they ran out of ideas and they just threw in more frustrating gimmicks. I remember the prison level Nova Prospect being especially frustrating for some reason. It felt like
Nova Prospect.
Oh, okay. Well, my memory's a lot rustier. I don't think I.
The defense portion of that though is really awful.
I remember something to do with turrets, and that was stupid.
Yeah, and the turrets suck. They keep knocking them over. They go directly for the turrets rather than getting shot by them. It's really weird.
Yeah. Well,
I did. Oh, do you have anything else?
No. Okay, I do have a couple things to say yet, but you go ahead.
I remembered another thing about Half-Life 2 that I really dislike. So, one thing that's notable about Half-Life and its sequels is that your character is in an environment filled with NPCs who may potentially be neutral or even friendly to you, and they might have things to say. It's not nearly RPG levels of character dialogue, but it's still kind of a neat thing, and it helps the worlds feel like a bit more of a real lived-in space. But there's one thing about Half-Life 2 in particular that I really dislike, and that's how many parts of the game are basically cutscenes that you're forced to sit through because you're moving around in them.
Yes!
And I have recently replayed the first Half-Life to compare, and there isn't nearly as much in the first Half-Life that fits that as there is in Half-Life 2. So yeah, what were you saying?
This was a frustrating thing that was in a lot of games in the 2000s. I think I called them, like, walking cutscenes that were unskippable or whatever. Like, whenever someone goes on the radio, it's like, you can move slowly, but, like, that's it. You can't, like, press start to get through it. Yeah, that bullshit.
Hate those so much.
Yes, Half-Life 2 kind of feels like it opened the door for that crap.
Yes, the plot closets followed by the plot corridors.
Yes, except the plot corridors. Yes. Exactly. Furthermore, if I may build on that, something that I wanted to say about the plot and/or atmosphere or whatever of Half-Life 2, something that has always bugged me, and I don't know if it's a lack of awareness on Valve's part or what, but the fact is, Gordon in the first Half-Life is very much a survivor. He does become a kind of improbable slayer of aliens and marines. Granted, that is part of the cheesy charm of the first game, and certainly the HEV suit he has helps him a lot. But even at the end of the day, he is just a nuclear physicist who just really got in way over his head. The second game treats Gordon like some sort of fucking messianic figure with a crowbar.
One free man.
Savior of humanity who just because he survived the Black Mesa incident, he's the most qualified person to bring down City 17's dictatorship. And, he does, granted, but I just think, the sort of approach that it takes that's really inflating Gordon's importance is a little stupid. That and Alex, the main female deuteragonist, falls in love with the guy despite him not saying a single word.
Oh, I hated that. Hated it.
It's very dumb, yes.
The forced shipping, it's like, why?
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't say a word.
It's
because he's supposed to be a self-insert for the presumed straight male audience.
Yeah, that it does feel a little bit like it's kind of feeding into the
horn dog nerds that would have been playing these sorts of games around the time, which I guess I would have been one of them, but it still felt disingenuous. And one more thing, if I may criticize, even though I feel like I've lingered on this a little bit long. The Shut up. Shut it up, you. We'll get to you, Rob. Don't worry. The gravity gun, for as great and cool weapon as it is, it feels like the game requires you to rely on it a lot, and it feels like that the arsenal around it isn't as good as it was in the first Half-Life. Because it's like, wow, check out this really cool thing, and like, okay, so where's the gluon gun? Hey, you can pick up saw blades. And then it just gets ridiculous because in the final leg of the game, all your weapons except for the gravity gun get vaporized, but then the gravity gun gets super powered, and then you can pick up enemies and kill them instantly with it. Which, I guess it was meant to be kind of like a victory lap power fantasy, whatever. But at that point, I was just like, I get it! The gravity gun's the best fucking thing you've ever made, Valve! Now shut up! If that complaint makes any sense, I don't know.
Yes, I agree.
HL2 was pretty landmark for its time, sure, but I just ironically think it has not held up as well as the first game. And like I said, with Black Mesa made to emphasize how awesome the first game was and be that but better, unless we get like a Black Mesa tier remake of Half-Life 2, I'm fine not playing it again. That's where I am.
And I'm fine never playing it ever. So
good transition.
In the chat, LDP asked what our thoughts are on Portal 1 and 2.
Oh, I love Portal and 2. Both of them.
I only played Portal 1, but I liked it well enough.
Yeah, I've only played the first Portal. I remember liking it, but it's also been several years since I played it, so I don't really remember it too well. I'd like to replay it and also play Portal 2 for the first time, so I'll get around to those at some point.
Believe it or not, I actually have played the first Portal.
I barely believe that.
I have played it, and I wasn't completely annoyed by it.
That's cool.
The humor helps. The humor does help.
Yes, a lot. But, puzzles, not my bag. So
me neither usually, but I do really like Portal, and I do really like its sequel. Granted, the sequel is much longer and more developed, but there is something to be said about the snappy charm and precision of the first one. But I think they're both really good. I still have yet to find someone to play Portal 2's co-op mode with. I still have that in my checklist sometimes. So. But, I would say that, both Portals are definitely much better than Half-Life 2, so...
Yeah. So with that, I think we're going to move on to Snarb.
Oh, yes. I'm trying to figure out which of my hot takes to start with here, but I think I'm going to pick the one that's really going to tick off Mike and probably everybody else, but Day of the Tentacle is the most overrated adventure game ever made. Good night, everybody. I will not be fielding any questions on this one. It is simply true.
Okay, before we go on, just want to say a couple things.
Sure.
BL85 Gamer and Fett are both here.
Hey, guys.
Welcome in, guys.
Hello.
And I don't really do the graphic adventures myself, so I've never actually played Day of the Tentacle. You go on now.
Kate has played it, actually, but I know Mike has.
Oh, yeah. I know that.
And it is actually my personal favorite graphic adventure game of all time, so you had to pick that one.
How do you feel about the bumblefucking back and forth to the toilet, the space toilets? Or the fact that most of the puzzles are actually kind of inane and aren't really funny or interesting?
Snarb, the thing of it is... those gripes that you have of Day of the Tentacle are much worse than so many other adventure games. Tentacle is relatively benign in comparison.
Right, but that's the thing. It colored my expectations for the genre because it was my first one. So, okay, that's fair, I guess. That's a fair criticism. But I wanted to love that game so much. I kind of struggled with games as a kid. I'm still not great at games, but I struggled even more. So imagine this, you order this from a book fair, I think it was a book order or a book fair. I forget how I got a hold of a boxed copy of it, but it looked awesome. It looked like a Saturday morning cartoon. It sounds like one. It has voice acting. this great animation, this interesting premise, and then, well, first off, the game is really persnickety about the damn bird box. Did you know that you can't pull a door closed, but you can only open and close it, and that's literally the only reason the open and close buttons exist? In other instances, you'll try to push something, and it's like, that doesn't work, so you have to pull it instead, even though he might go behind the object to do that. So that was already bad enough trying to figure that out as a kid, trying to figure out what it wanted from me. I would later learn that there was actually shortcuts. You can just right-click to get the most relevant action on things, but either the manual didn't mention it, or I had very poor reading comprehension. I will go with both, maybe, but I wanted to like that game, and every year or so, every 6 months to a year, I would restart the whole game, and I would get a little bit further, but then something else would get me stuck. Something else, and it's like, my big problem with a lot of graphic adventures, the non-Sierra style ones, I have a different opinion on the Sierra style ones for obvious reasons, but there's this meta mechanic in the graphic adventures that I call getting stuck. Most of them don't have failure states. You can't lose. And according to some people, that means they're not video games, but we're not going to get into that so much as it is like very frustrating to have this mechanic outside of the game that prevents progression. That isn't a skill issue necessarily so much as it is you just don't get it. Like, some of the puzzles in Day of the Tentacle are straightforward. Others are really weird. Or, they're like space logic. Like, every adventure game I've played has had space logic puzzles in it. Some are better than others about that. I found that in the Sierra games, particularly King's Quest V, which does kill you a lot, it's a little, like the puzzles are a little bit more obvious in some cases. Like, there's timing issues involved with that. There is actually skill elements in that game. But because the controls are streamlined, you can either examine something, or you can pick it up, or you can interact with it. Those are your three options. It makes it a lot easier to play, and almost every modern adventure game since about the year 2000 has stuck with that. There's a very good reason the bird box died. And the bird box doesn't really add anything to Day of the Tentacle either, because you can interact with things in like 9 different ways, but half the time the guy just says, I can't do that. And I think my other issue with the game is that, okay, you have these 3 characters, right? They have to go back into different time points or something. They're supposed to go back in the past to try and stop Purple Tentacle, who was from the first Maniac Mansion, I think, along with Green Tentacle. So you have to go back in time to stop him. He's evil. He's trying to take over the world, but you get split apart, and they're all stranded at different time zones or time periods. So they have to figure that out. So you're trying to navigate this game that has 3 different sets of puzzles with 3 different sets of characters, and there's so much about this game I could say. I could rant about this for hours, but suffice to say, I feel like they stretched the game a little too thin. Bernard, the nerdy character, who's actually the only returning character from the first game that isn't, the titular owners of the Maniac Mansion. I forget their names, actually, their last name.
The Edisons.
But, yes, the Edisons do return, but they're not playable, obviously. He is the only one he has the most puzzles out of anybody, and he has the most to say about things. Which is kind of disappointing because you have this really psychotic med student by the name of is it Laverne?
Yeah, Laverne.
And then you have this metalhead called Hoagie, and I just realized something actually. It's funny to me that the one female character gets stuck in the future with all the purple tentacles. There's some commentary going on there, I believe.
Damn it! God damn you! Why did you have to ruin that? I never even. God, fucking Jesus!
I feel like that's intentional now that I realize that. But anyway, she's a psychotic med student, but they don't really send her to a time period where she could say or do interesting things. And the same is kind of true with Hoagie. Hoagie gets sent to the War of Independence. He actually gets to meet the founding fathers, but the jokes aren't particularly interesting outside of, whoa, this guy is totally inappropriate to be here. He should not be here. And he says weird, funny, modern things to them. And the premise is so interesting, but I feel like they botched the execution in a number of ways. Having come back around to the game, I actually beat the enhanced remake just this year, 30 years after the fact that, 30 years after I first got a copy of the game, or 30 years after the game released, I finally was able to beat it, and my opinion has improved a little bit, but it's still kind of the same. There's a specific sticking point I actually have with it. that I know Mike disagrees with, but I feel like the stakes aren't appropriate for the storyline. I actually don't mind deaths in adventure games because they can set the stakes and also tell you what not to do. Whereas in this game, you kind of just have to bumblefuck with puzzles. You kind of have to just figure how to put everything together. And if you can't reason with it, if you're a child who doesn't know how to use the internet, who doesn't know what a hint file or an FAQ is, who has no friends who play graphic adventures, this is going to be a really bad time. You kind of have to play these games in a certain context for it to really work. I'm sorry, I went on a little long about this, but I believe you have a huge rebuttal in store.
Okay, Mike, I'm going to start timing you on this one.
I don't know why you always get the goddamn timer.
You know why.
All right. Not just endemic to it. Like the verb thing, the other...
Wait a sec, Mike.
Hmm?
I just got word OBS disconnected and reconnected, so you might want to start over.
Shit.
Oh, darn.
But
Yeah,
it's back on now.
Okay, well, as long as... all right, well, technical difficulties aside... Yeah, the verb thing is certainly not endemic today, the tentacle. Actually, it is a bit more cleaned up compared to past LucasArts adventures, which had even more verbs and some that were a lot more ad hoc. Their interface simplified a lot more down the line to the point that, like, Full Throttle only had, like, I don't know, 4 regular commands or something like that, so it's just kind of interesting how that descended. But I prefer having those verbs instead of having to work with a text parser, personally. Basically, what LucasArts adventures do are almost in every way the diametric opposite of how Sierra did their adventure games, and I much prefer the LucasArts way. Now, I don't know if that's nostalgia because I grew up on their games more so than I did Sierra's, and the fact that Sierra's kept killing me and I had to go to, like, the beginning of the game was not so nice. I at least appreciated that if I was at least stuck in a game like Day of the Tentacle, then I did not have to start the beginning of the game if I blew it terribly. But, yeah... Tentacle is actually my personal favorite of the LucasArts adventures, and as it stands still, my favorite graphics adventure game of all time, and I don't think that's going to change. It's,
I have to ask this. You say you don't like being killed in games, but Maniac Mansion, the precursor to this, did actually have higher stakes. You also had to save the world, but you could die and actually get a number of bad endings. You also could pick more characters, which... I think one of them's almost useless, like they have no items that actually help.
Yeah, Jeff, what he did better by, I think, Bernard or Sid, I forget exactly.
He could fix a phone or something, couldn't he? And that was it.
Yeah, it's like, and one of the other characters could do that too, so he was just redundant. But, yeah, no, I do like Day's setup. I do like its humor, although I concede that could be hit or miss. I actually thought its puzzles were surprisingly more intuitive than LucasArts has had in other games that they've done. I know that sounds a little bit
I feel like that's also kind of a detriment, because you think sometimes something has cartoon logic associated with it, and then it's like, use knife on something, and it's like, oh, okay, wash this thing with soap and water. Oh, okay.
You did at least think to use the knife on Uzo the Clown, did you?
Yes,
Okay, good.
You have this. Okay, so you get there's a scalpel, but there's another sharp weapon that should actually be able to pop it, but it won't let you do that. There's actually a couple of other items in the game that are red herring. Like, you can get a hubcap, which you can recycle, and it does nothing else. I don't know what that was about.
Well, I just think that Tentacle, like... You do have some valid picks at it, but again, I do think it is more intuitive and inviting than other LucasArts games of the time. Maybe, I mean, that's certainly just going to depend on the user, but there was only last time when I did actually set out to beat the game in earnest, there was only one puzzle that I needed to look up an FAQ for, which, all things considered, is very good, because I've had to do that a lot more for other games by LucasArts or whoever else. That was the use the textbook on the horse to get his teeth, which is
It actually kind of makes sense if you actually have Hoagie read the book. Like, there's something to imply that you need to get the horse to fall asleep because it has dentures, and there's not really many other items that can do that. So there's a little bit of a leap of logic, but not much of one there. That one I actually kind of figured out when I was going through again. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense because you have this boring textbook that doesn't seem to serve any other purpose. I do want to jump back to a point. You harp on the text parsers. First off, to be fair, I have not played any of those King's Quest games, so I understand the frustrations there. But to be fairer,
Oopsie.
Roberta Williams invented the graphic adventure. It was basically a text adventure with graphics, so I can't really fault them that hard.
Yeah, take that, Mike.
Yes.
Yeah, and she made very not nice games that I think were made better by other people.
Also, it gave us
Shots
Peasant's Quest, so I
fired.
can't fault King's Quest that much.
Okay, Peasant's Quest is great.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'll give you that, sure.
There's also Thy Dungeon Man, but I don't think I played past the first one of those.
Did you at least manage to get Ye Flask?
I believe I did, yes.
Oh, well, congratulations, you win.
Heck, even I got you, Flask.
But you can't get G Flask.
But yeah, anyway, your criticisms aren't invalid, but I just like Tentacle. I think it does everything right for the genre in my mind, and I like its overall setting. And also, Dyer, you might be interested in this. Bernard is actually voiced by Richard Sanders, aka Les Nessman from WKRP in Cincinnati.
No kidding.
Which is something I didn't realize until somewhat recently. So
That's hilarious.
yeah,
I'll
and he
be-
does great with it too.
I'll say this about Day of the Tentacle. I love the aesthetic. I still love it. It's got
Yeah.
that great cartoon look to it. Some of it actually does kind of lean into the madcap humor pretty well. But given the plot and given a lot of other things, I don't feel like the stakes are really appropriate for what these characters have to do. And also, a lot of the puzzles aren't very interesting, or kind of have you kind of have to the puzzle that I got stuck on. I just remember this. It's the wine puzzle. You have to do something with a bottle of wine, and I didn't realize that if you leave wine alone long enough, it turns into vinegar. That was one of those time fuckery puzzles that went way over my head as a kid.
I will admit, my memory is a little rusty. I can see how some of the puzzles would be frustrating, to be sure, but again, my main argument is that whatever Tentacle does that you didn't like, other adventure games have done worse with it. So that might be a bit of a weak argument, Grant, but I just like Tentacle. That's all there is to it. I will give you this. Laverne does get kind of screwed since you can't play as her right away, and it
You're
takes kind
thinking
a
of
long
those
time
tentacles, aren't you, Mike?
to get them. No, shut up. I'm not using screwed in that definition, you bastard. I do think Hoagie actually gets more focus than you gave him credit for, though.
He does he gets the second most, and then Laverne is she has kind of the least interesting puzzles and least interesting setting outside of the obvious joke setup.
Yeah, well, it is absolutely not a perfect game, but I'm just really charmed by it, and relatively speaking, it has been one of the least frustrating LucasArts adventure games I played, so that's why it's my favorite. That and Sam & Max are my favorites they've done, but Sam &
I
Max
still need to play Sam & Max.
I will
I
admit
feel like that
Sa-
one... Sorry.
You might like that one more, yeah, but I will warn that I think its puzzles might be even more Moon Logic-y at times, just because of the overall weirdness of the setting, so...
Okay. Zaphiro in the, or is it Zaphiro? I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong.
She pronounces her name Zafira.
Okay, Zaphiro. Okay, she points out that the weird headlines, I did actually like that. I love that bit, actually, from Day of the Tentacle.
Oh, yes, that's right, that kept updating. And bit I remember when, Laverne meets the Edison descendants in prison, she said, "Damn that Dr. Fred. Hey, she knows the family motto." There is a lot of great dialogue, and I found it a very hilarious adventure. And yes, Meows, I loved the characters. And like taking relative bit characters, the tentacles from the original Maniac Mansion, and promoting them to much more important characters that I think Purple Tentacle is just unironically a really fun villain. He makes no bones about how evil he is, but like he just fits the setting of the game just really hilariously, and it's like
he is a good part, but again, he doesn't get used often enough. He's basically like, "Muhaha, I am evil. Here is my evil plan. Uh-oh, I have been defeated."
Well, I guess we're talking about character deaths from characters from the 90s when characterization in video games was only starting to become a larger thing around this time, but basically I ultimately concede that, you know, your criticisms aren't invalid, but you have to pick my personal favorite. Like, dump on Monkey Island 2. I'm less fond of that one.
Well, as they say, you know I had to do it to you, Mike.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I guess you did.
And, welcome Ruby into the chat.
Hey, Ruby. Kate, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I'm curious about that, Kate.
So, I've never played Day of the Tentacle. I am not really the kind of person who's into most adventure games, but part of me is a little bit curious about them. I feel like over the past couple years or so, I've been gradually trying to play certain adventure games, but I basically need help from someone to get through them, since I've never liked solving puzzles, and I'm not good at that, and it just frustrates me. I think one particular recent adventure game that I played through at the start of this year was 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. And as an experience, I thought it was really cool, but I definitely had to have my friend help me through the whole thing. So I imagine if I ever got around to Day of the Tentacle... Actually, that's a direct sequel to Maniac Mansion, right?
Yeah,
so
yes.
I would probably want to play Maniac Mansion first. But
yes, do. It's worth playing too.
I imagine both Maniac Mansion and Day of the Tentacle would be hard for me to play unless I had, like, significant help from others. So
Maniac
not
Mansion,
a priority for me.
Maniac Mansion is a considerably shorter game than Tentacle, but it is also a less forgiving one because there are failure states that you can run into, and I think at some point it even gets an overarching timer on it. It's been a while since I played it, so
it's replayable too because you have different characters to play as, which is very rare in an adventure game. A lot of them are hyperlinear.
Yeah, that's when graphic adventures were just kind of, I guess, like finding their footing around that time. Like only like 2 or so years after King's Quest were made, so they were a lot more experimental, and there weren't as many definitions. And yeah, the fact that you could play as different characters which had different solutions to the puzzles was really novel. I do love Maniac Mansion. Also, I grew up playing the NES port, which has that really cool music by George Sanger in it. So. I am admittedly not huge on adventure games in general either, because I'm terrible at puzzles and logic, and if I'm spending the game with, like, an FAQ open the side for, like, 99% of it, am I even really playing the game? Like, what's the point of this? I am biased towards the ones that LucasArts have made. While they're not all excellent, I do like most of the ones that they've done, and I am kind of biased towards them, but adventure games are very weird and to get into, but I like shut the fuck up. I know I'm babbling directionlessly about this at this point, but
I will ask you this, Mike. Would you at least agree that The Neverhood is better than Day of the Tentacle?
Come on, man. Why you gotta make me choose like that? I think, technically, it might be a better game to play, and it is definitely a top 10 adventure game, and I love it as well. But Tentacle's still my number one. I don't think it's ever going to change. Sorry.
Well, that is where we have to agree to disagree.
Yes, sir. Indeed.
Well,
anyway, since Mr. Soundboard here wants to go next,
I just gonna say all I can say about adventure games is if I was gonna play one of these graphic adventures, I would probably just go right to Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
Yes, that is great. That game is fucking great. Many would agree that's one of LucasArts' best ones overall. I I'm not sure if it's top 3 in my end, but it's really fucking high. So yeah.
But
do that someday. I think you would like.
Yeah, maybe. I just don't have the patience for graphic adventures.
That too. That they are. They're not games like Contra. So if it's not a game like Contra, I know that's like automatically like from an A to a B minus for you.
However,
I mean,
there are exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I have played through and thoroughly enjoyed both Shadowgate and Uninvited.
Oh yes, those ones are.
And those are also games that kill you.
Mm-hmm.
That too, yes.
And
Motherfucker! Sorry, my phone. I thought I turned that alarm off.
wow.
all right, Kate, you were going to say?
You can go ahead. I don't remember.
Okay. Well, we're going to leave the graphic adventures behind and move on to my first hot take. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say when Mike brought up Contra that not really related to the takes per se, but just as a quick note that like different people will like different things, and for some people they might find the difficulty of an action game like Contra off-putting to them in the same way that some of us find hard puzzles off-putting in an adventure game. So
no, you're completely right.
That's true.
I am being very biased in my opinions, but Contra is my #1 favorite game ever, so I had to.
I love Contra.
Wedge it in.
Gosh.
We all do here. So
well, if anyone remembers the Contra roundtable we did, then they
yeah,
they know how
I
we
was
feel.
there for that one.
no hot takes
not
in
honest,
Contra.
but
We're all agreed
Nope.
there. So.
But anyway, I have decided that my first one is going to be about one of the most sacred cows in gaming ever. A game that people have sworn is one of the best games to ever exist, if not the outright best of all time. And I don't agree with that. That game is Super Mario Brothers 3.
Oh fuck.
This is going to piss off a lot of the chat, but
Let's find out.
I'm one of those heathens that's like Super Mario Brothers 2 the most out of any Mario game, so please go ahead.
Hey,
no,
Mario 2 is the greatest Mario game ever made.
I'm not sure if I go that far, but it's my favorite Mario game on the NES. So,
well, that's where I stand on that. Anyway, so I do have some pros for the game. You know, it's got okay graphics. You know, it's got an okay soundtrack. The controls are good. I never had a problem with that. But it's overstuffed. It's overlong, and it sowed the seeds for future Mario games because of being overstuffed and overlong. And its popularity just overshadows many games on the NES that are better. Like, look at Kirby's Adventure.
I do love that one, Bird.
That is, yes. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, you bring up NES platformer and, you know, what you think is great, and people are like, oh, Mario 3, that's the greatest game. I grew up playing that game. Well, no. Sorry. But, yeah, it just... I remember being so excited when that game came out. It was like, Mario 3's out. I've got to check this out. I love the first one, love the second one. This is going to be great. You know? And I rented it. And I played it. And I played it. And after a while, my enthusiasm began to change. Initially, you know, first stage was like, oh, this is a must-buy, I gotta get this. By the time I returned to the video store, I was like, you know, I'm probably never even going to rent that again. I just didn't like it. But, interestingly enough, I did like Mario World, but that's a different story entirely.
That's my personal favorite Mario game ever made.
You know, LDP, I've played the All-Stars version, and I still feel exactly the same way. Although the graphics do look a little better. And it does sound a little better. But, also, for the record, fuck Pipe World.
Yeah,
just had to throw that out there.
I know we all have things to say about it, but I'm not sure who should go first, unless you had more to say, Rob.
Oh, I've got a little more to say.
Gotcha.
Let's see. That didn't stop me from eventually owning a copy of it. I've got it on the Famicom. But it's just, when I saw, when I was talking about how it planted the seeds for, the future Mario games. I remember playing Mario World 2, and it was just more of that. It felt like, coupled with the addition of Baby Mario crying his head off whenever he got knocked off Yoshi. So it's like, oh, it's a giant collectathon with multiple worlds and stuff. With so many things to do and collect, and I'm bored already. And then, Mario 64 came out, and I just prefer not to go there. I may even have a hotter take when it comes to that one. But, yeah, it was part of the reason I just never got into the N64. It just wasn't it was not the Mario I knew. And I've looked at some of the ones that come since then, like the new Super Mario Bros. Series looks interesting and all that, but I don't know. Mario 3, I basically, it just ground to a halt for me. Except that I did kind of get back into the world, and then I just dropped right back out. And I see Sharon's here. Maybe just in time to hear me trashing Mario 3.
Hello.
Which I know she loves. As so many other people do. So, who wants to go first?
I think Kate has the horse in this race, or however that phrase goes.
You want to go ahead and go, Kate?
I probably do.
By all means, go right ahead.
Begin. So, I feel it's kind of funny to say this, considering the other hosts here, but I think I might be the outlier here in that I really love Super Mario Bros. 3. I really think it's an incredible experience. As far as the NES trilogy is concerned, I like the first Super Mario Bros. A lot. I think it's an excellent game in a lot of ways, and it would help lay the groundwork for the series yet to come. Then as far as Super Mario Bros. 2, I don't personally like either the North American or Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2 games. The Japanese one, I think, is way too difficult to be much fun. And I don't like the change in gameplay that the North American Super Mario Bros. 2 has. It doesn't feel like a Mario game to me, which makes sense since it literally was not a Mario game. It just was reskinned to be Mario. I don't like picking up enemies and tossing them at other enemies. I mean, there are other games like later on that would do something similar that I enjoy, but it feels very stiff and awkward to me in Super Mario Bros. 2. I never cared for that. So coming from that to Super Mario Bros. 3, to me, Super Mario Bros. 3 felt like a return to form, as well as an extension of where the first game laid the groundwork, going off into a gigantic world filled with stages to explore and potentially different orders depending on which stages you tackle in the overworld first. I like the inventory. I like that there are lots of hidden secrets to find, not just within the individual stages as the first Super Mario Bros. Introduced, but there are also hidden areas on the world map. If you use certain key items at the right time, then you can find hidden world map sections that you might have overlooked otherwise. And I find that makes each individual world's trek really engaging and exciting. And I don't know if I would consider Super Mario Bros. 3 my favorite game in the series by far. I do think it's very high up there, but one particular thing that I think is worthy of praise for Super Mario Bros. 3 is that it's the last Mario game where I feel like lives are a really important mechanic. Since a lot of later Mario games, they would still have an extra life system, but it doesn't really matter, because if you lose all your lives in a modern Mario game, you just continue from where you were, and it's like nothing happened, so who cares? But in Super Mario Bros. 3, as far as I recall, if you lose all your lives, you have to go to the very start of the current world you're on. And that can be a significant setback. So that makes the lives that you do attain, either through getting 100 coins or getting a one-up mushroom or whatnot, really significantly valuable. And I really like that there's an emphasis on resource management with regard to getting enough points to get enough lives to survive a world, and also using items in the right stages from your inventory. And I really love Super Mario World a lot as well, which was the follow-up to Super Mario Bros. 3, but that is a game that I feel like is maybe a little bit too easy. And I feel like it's the first game in the series where lives are not really as important.
Yeah,
And
they give you enough of them.
yeah. I mean, like, I love Super Mario World, and I love Super Mario Bros. 3, both for somewhat different reasons, but yeah, I think Super Mario Bros. 3 is an excellent game, and I adore it.
Well, I certainly can't argue with anything you said. You do have a lot of good points.
That's fair.
And I do want to address something LDP said in the chat, which was that basically the collectathon elements are optional, and Mario 3 doesn't even have those. But it did sow the seeds for it, as far as I'm concerned. Also,
Are you talking about the inventory?
well, the inventory is part of it, plus, you know, I'm trying to think where was I going with this.
Are you thinking of like the toad houses?
Yeah, that's part of it too. But also, I have another complaint, which is totally separate from that whole thing. Why are we limited to using the Karibo shoe for one stage?
Agreed on that. Yeah,
Make it that much more enjoyable.
It's only one stage. Maybe once every level would have been fine, but just
That's fair.
one stage in the middle of wherever in the hell it is.
5-3, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, anyway, yeah, I've tried playing the game again over the years. I've finished it, I've done all that, and it just never. I still feel the same way. So, anyway, Kate, if you have anything else to add, we can go on to somebody else.
I think that's totally fair. At the end of the day, I wouldn't say that someone is wrong for disliking Super Mario Bros. 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an excellent experience, but not everyone is going to enjoy the same things as everyone else. So if you happen to not care for it, then that's totally cool. Go ahead and enjoy what you do enjoy.
Exactly, and, I can definitely say the same about your picks as well.
Thanks.
Even though we haven't gotten to a couple of them yet, but we will.
We will.
All right, who wants to go next? Mike, Snarb?
I will let Mike go next.
Sure. Well, I am actually more on the side of Rob on this one, personally. I do like SMB3 more than he does, relatively speaking. I have definitely gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it over the years, and when I actually get back to actually playing it and just enjoying the feel and mechanics of it, then this game's rad. It looks great, it sounds great, it plays great enough, and I can see why other people would love it as much as they do. But there are at least 3 faults in the game that hold it back from achieving the level of greatness that most others ascribe to it. One of them, being the lack of saves, and LDP did address that, the All-Stars version does fix that, but, I like the aesthetics of the NES version just a teensy bit more, and the warp whistles are not an adequate replacement, in my opinion, because I lost my entire inventory. I was saving that P-Wing for the airship at the end. That's maybe the most insignificant gripe, all things considered, but, no, foremost gripe I do have is that there are way too many auto-scrolling levels in SMB3.
Oh, yeah, I hate those too.
Yeah, auto-scrollers being parts where the screen moves at its own pace and Mario has to keep up with it, instead of the pace of the level being dictated by Mario's speed. Like, you give him that running meter in the game, and you're telling me that I can't even make the best out of it for like a fifth of the game's levels? That's bullshit. I mean, I'm okay with the airships at the end of each stage being auto-scrollers. That does make them feel more challenging and atmospheric because you have to deal with the cannons on the screen and whatnot. I'm okay with that, and that it seems appropriate for those levels, but like, it's like I think there's like an early level and even just like the first world. It's been a while since I played it, but like, why is this auto-scrolling? Why am I auto-scrolling for these stages that have those stupid flippy, rotating platforms that just go ape shit like every 3 seconds? I don't think I like this very much. This is like bordering on Kaizo Mario.
Those damn donut drops too.
Oh yeah, the donut platforms. I'm not a huge fan of those either. And like, I'm okay with them as they are, but you combine things with auto scrollers, that's just annoying in my opinion. It's not how I like my challenge to be necessarily. If this level's at least tough, I want to at least be able to squash through it quickly if I can. The auto scrollers just get really obnoxious outside of the end levels, in my opinion. And it really reaches critical mass in the final world, which actually is comorbid with... Actually, there's another complaint I thought of. The Tanuki and Hammer suits are so awesome, and they're both extremely fucking rare. Like, almost as rare as the Kurbo shoe and the Hammer suits. Like, just a little taste of power, and it's so easy to lose. That's like,
part of the game's balance.
Balance, BS, BFing-S. I'm alright, I guess I'll settle for the raccoon, thingy, leaf, but... Yeah, see, Prime agrees with me about the auto-scroll, so it's a valid complaint. I don't know why it doesn't annoy more people.
Yep, and if you've noticed, Eugene's here.
Hey, Eugene, how's it going?
Welcome.
Hello.
Gotta disagree with you there, Eugene, but it's different strokes for different folks. That's the best way I can auto-scroll, boss. Son of a... like, my other foremost complaint is not only that the game is absolutely too long, I agree with Rob there, but it's also that the last 2 worlds fucking suck. Pipe World is bad, and Bowser's area is also bad because it just goes overboard with the auto-scrollers. It's like half of the levels are... Like, even more than half, I think, are meant to be like the airships. And they're very slow and sloggy to get through as well. Ironically, Bowser's actual castle, the very final level, is not an auto-scroller. But it does end in one of the most anticlimactic boss fights in video game history, where you just crouch to win. Ta-da! He put up much more of a fight in World, and that's why World is more superior. But, anyway, I guess what I'm saying is that the first 6 worlds I'm okay with. Okay, level 3 has that fucking giant fish that I hate, and level 6 is, of course... World 6 is, of course, the ice world, which is also not great, but I can tolerate those. But the last 2 worlds, if they were just cut out entirely, I think the game's length would be more appropriate, and we would have already seen the best. I just think it does get kind of long in the tooth in the end, and it's still a very good game. But as far as Mario titles are concerned, it's not on my top 5 list. That's the kindest way I can put my relative disdain for the game. It's like 7 or 8. Let's go with that.
Okay.
How about you, Snarb?
I don't have too much to add to what Mike said. I agree with a lot of points. I'm one of those people that thinks Super Mario Bros. 3 is better than World. I actually like the Battleship world. I like Bowser's world the most out of any of them because there's that tank stage that's just so cool. And I actually like all the battleships. I could stand an entire Mario game of battleships, whether they auto-scroll or not is whatever. But it's a good-looking game. It's a good playing game. I don't know if it's in my top 10 Mario games or even in my top 10 NES games, but it's good. Well, it felt like a step back from 2 in a lot of ways. I've really missed the multiple playable characters that play differently, and also being able to pick up dudes and throw them at other dudes.
Yeah, you know what? SMB 2 was really progressive in that regard. We would not get to play as Princess Peach, nay Toadstool, for a really freaking long time in a mainline Mario game. So,
I mean, that is fair. I do really like Princess Peach, so it's a bummer that she isn't playable in more games. But
Absolutely.
it's saying something that I prefer the other games over Super Mario Brothers 2, even despite being able to play as Peach there.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, that upcoming Peach game is looking pretty cool, I will say.
There's also
yeah.
Super Mario Wonder, which I think lets you play as Peach and Daisy. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't think you can play as Toad though, sadly.
Yes,
I
as
hope those turn
BBW
out
elephants. I'll shut up now.
I think my one thing that I would say, just as a funny note in response to the auto-scrolling complaints, is I'm surprised you two like shooters as much as you do.
Shmups are a little bit different in that
They're a
respect,
lot.
That's
actually.
different, though.
That's very
Because you have a
different.
smaller hitbox. Otherwise, you have to navigate through a field with gravity in it, and no one likes gravity in Shmup either. Like
Nope.
waterfalls or gravity
Yeah.
fields or.
Yeah, waterfalls and shooters suck.
They can
Yeah,
be rough. Yes.
They always do that stupid weighing you down thing. Damn it. They always do that.
I've died so many times to waterfalls in Sexy Proteus.
Yeah, they'll do that.
And R-Type 2.
Sexy Parodius is fucking vicious, despite how cute it looks.
Yeah, this is true. Alright. So, at this point, since we're about an hour and a half in and we just got done with round 1,
Oops.
yeah. I don't particularly want to go on for like 4 hours with this, so
Right.
what we can do is go ahead and eliminate one of our takes and just do one more each, which will probably take us the next hour and a half to 2 hours.
Okay.
Well, we'll see how we feel. I'll try and keep myself down for
Alright.
the latter ones for Cam.
So, in that case, everyone just think real hard about the next one you want to do, because it might be the last.
Okay.
Alright, so we'll go back to Mike.
Okie dokes. Well, since the last one I chose, despite being the positive one, was a last-minute pick on my end, I think I'll go for the other negative one, because I've been really grumpy about a lot of things lately. And it's a more contemporary game, and Rob, I know you have no stake in this one, but
Nope.
I know Kate does. I will be absolutely able to curry her favor on this matter. I'm not a big fan of Shadow of the Colossus. Lots of people call this one of the greatest, most artistic, most visionary, most gorgeous whatever games made, and I just don't really align with all that. It's
But Mike, would you say it is Ghibli-esque?
I would not shut the fuck up.
Hey, Mike, I got a question for you.
Yes?
Have you ever discussed this with Sam?
He's a big fan, isn't he?
Yes.
Of course he is. Well, he loves Uncharted, I don't, so that's my response to that. I was almost thinking about talking about one of the Uncharted games, but I don't think anyone here's played any of those, so,
Played the original Uncharted.
it would be UC2 I'd be talking about, since that's the one that everybody praises.
Okay.
As it were. But, yeah, SOTC is an okay game, Cute Meow said. I completely agree with that. I do like things about it. I had well enough fun playing it. Well, some of the Colossi were quite cool. That giant flying worm one, I think it was the 13th one. I agree that is a really fucking great moment. Lots of people would agree that one is the best Colossus in the game and one of the best moments ever in the 6th generation, and yeah, I'll get behind that if nothing else. But I don't know. It's weird. I love boss fights in video games, and this game is for the most part nothing but boss fights. So you think that would get me on board with it? But I don't know. I do feel like there needed to be a little bit more substance to the gameplay, like, you know. I know this is shallow shit, but, you know, maybe have me solve a few box puzzles here and there to sort of
Also, you want it to be a Zelda game, which it's interesting to note the latest Zelda games took the grip meter from Shadow of the Colossus.
Okay, you got me there. Wah, wah, wah. But
Oh, do you need help with that mic here?
wait for it. There we go. But like, I understand that the large emptiness of the open world in question is very endemic to how apocalyptic and dreary the world feels, and to some that there is some sort of like beauty in that sort of dreariness as well. I just think I'm taking a while to get to my boss fight, and while I like this horse and all, it feels like I'm not really doing anything before getting to the boss fight, and it's like, I don't know. I just what's my main gripe with this game? I think I'm just not really fond of how the combat works in question, which mostly consists of climbing the Colossus and striking it in its weak spots. I realize that works well enough for this games, but other games that did this sort of Colossus climb style of boss fight, LCX says that SOTC has Dark Souls DNA all over, and I am a huge Souls fan, so...
But Souls doesn't really have the Colossus fights in it. Now, one game that does have a lot of Colossus fights in it is Lords of Shadow.
Boo!
Art. It completely rips those off and it does them worse. Like, there's only 3 of them as opposed to the 16 that had, but Lords of Shadow has no identity of its own. God.
Lords of Shadow just sucks.
I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm
an even less of a fan.
Yeah, indeed. Like, I do think that I can, to an extent, get behind the sort of things that people say about how gorgeous SOTC is, and, like, the Colossi are tragic creatures, and it's a bad thing we're killing them, then there's that twist that drops at the end, etc. and so forth, and sure. I do think, though, that some of that talk gets a little bit wanky after a while, and this is how, like, much of a... Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of a, crass, classless sort of body roustabout I would be... I'm not sure what the word is I'm looking for. Plebeian, yes. A plebe, if you will. Where I show through to be a bit of a plebe is that, some games that get talked about for their artistic merit, I just kind of roll my eyes and go, okay, but is it fun to play? I realize you can't approach every game with that same metric, like, there's something like, speaking of pretentiousness, Braid or whatever, which, is fun enough to play, but then there's all that other stuff that goes around it, and, like... I don't know. A game that's known more for being artistic rather than being fun to play is generally not something that I like all that much. But I thought that Shadow would at least be fun to play because it is pretty much just all boss fights, and many of them are fought very differently from each other. But I just found it kind of slow, and I guess the relative beauty of the game didn't really register with me. I'd also play its predecessor, Ico, or Eco, or however you pronounce it, and yeah, that one wasn't excellent to play either, but I think I did at least like it a little more because I felt its world was more creative, and I thought the interaction with the princess gave it more life. I'm not necessarily saying that's a better game all around, but you don't hear Eco praised quite... You hear it praised enough, not as much as Shadow, which is like one of the defining games of the 6th generation, and on the podcast I sometimes guest on, Top 47K Games, it placed really, really, really high on our list, and I was on the episode, but I was kind of pilloried by our guest Slow Beef into rating it really high, and now I kind of regret it.
Thanks,
if you're
Slow
out
Beef.
there, I love you, Beef, but god damn you, I still haven't forgiven you for that one. So, it's an alright game. It just doesn't really hit my own metrics for what I look for in a video game. That's just... That's just what I think. Eco was pretty cool, though. I would actually say that I do like Eco more in the long run. It feels like its gameplay was less its focus, and I could appreciate what it did more. Shadow, it just kind of set the precedent for this is how giant fights in video games go, and I don't like how this goes. So, I don't know, it's a bit of a stupid complaint, but that's just how I overall feel. Yeah, what Scroll Boss said. Visuals are cool, but experiencing great gameplay with... I kind of joke that gameplay is 9/10 of the law, and there are a few games I like that are not as great for their gameplay as they are their graphics or their story or whatever. I fucking love Ghost Trick, and while that game plays well, it's really the story that's the main draw of that one. And I am a fan of the Ace Attorney series as a henceforth. I don't know. What Shadow does, it does well. It's just that what it does isn't for me. That's, I think, the best way I can sum it up.
Okay, so who'd like to go ahead and take the first rebuttal on this one? Kate? Snarb?
Is it okay if I go first?
Go ahead,
sir.
I don't have a lot to say about it. I never did beat the game because I don't own a PlayStation 2, but what I did play of it, I did like quite a bit. I'm very much an aesthetics over or an aesthetics and mechanics over gameplay kind of person. I can vibe with the game if I either think it looks great or if I think the mechanics are interesting, even if it's a bad game. And Shadow of the Colossus has great aesthetics and interesting mechanics. I actually kind of like the empty open world. It allows for more contemplation when you're kind of just exploring it casually, trying to get to the next spot. I'm not a big fan of the treasure trove model for open world games, which is the only model these days. I kind of like the idea that you just have this world that has its own sense of place that isn't there. It wasn't built for you. You just happen to be in it. It's really weird how seemingly in some ways that game seems forgotten despite how influential it is. I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was LEC that said that they felt it was like a precursor to Dark Souls. I can kind of see that, actually. I can see that a lot. It had interest, like the visuals definitely kind of defined the 7th gen in some ways, despite being a 6th gen game. I'm trying to think what else I was going to say. The grip meter, obviously, Zelda has actually borrowed a lot from that series. I felt like Twilight Princess, what I was able to play of it recently, actually feels kind of like Shadow of the Colossus in some ways in terms of atmosphere, in terms of look, in terms of its structure. It doesn't have the grip meter, but the way it handles the open world is very similar. It's not necessarily a treasure trove. It's just kind of a place you can exist in, and I like that. Otherwise, I don't have much else to say about it. It's an okay game. It's, I would even argue, a great game, but it's, again, probably not in my top 10. And more importantly, it's probably one of the only positive memories I have out of a very bad relationship. So I appreciate it for that, for being one of those few things I actually enjoy.
I get you.
All right. How about you, Kate?
I fucking hate Shadow of the Colossus. I think it's a piece of shit. It's
That's
one
another
of the
reason
worst
why I
fucking
chose
games I've ever played in my entire life.
That's another reason why I chose this, because I know I'd have someone in my corner, albeit someone who actually genuinely really hates the game a lot more than my mild disdain of it.
I mean, when it comes down to it, I probably wouldn't call it the worst game I've ever played in my entire life. I think it's definitely one of the worst major big budget games that I've ever played in my life, but there are probably other games out there that I despise more. But Shadow of the Colossus is definitely very low on my list of games that I've played. I have almost nothing positive to say about it. I just thought it was a horrendous experience, pretty much from start to finish. I don't think anything about it is good as a game. There's... Yeah.
For what's worth, our mutual friend Kurt, I remember back when the game released in the day, he didn't have very many kind words about it, and he got pissed off whenever anyone was waxing about how beautiful the Colossi were, and that it's so tragic they die. His rebuttal was, no, they were jerks!
I didn't know Kurt didn't like Shadow of the Colossus.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't. I know that he hated the frame rate of the original PS2 version.
Oh yeah, that is actually something about the original game that is genuinely terrible.
Yeah.
It is absolutely atrocious performance. I think only Killzone performs worse on the PS2.
Wow, really? Shit.
Well, it's up there in terms of games that are really bad. It's like 20 FPS, I think, in Killzone. I don't know about Shadow of the Colossus. It wouldn't shock me if that's also 20 FPS, or even 15.
I actually played Shadow of the Colossus via the Eco and Shadow of the Colossus HD collection on PS3, so I did not have to deal with that low a frame rate. But
I
even
have heard
so,
that messes with the original game. I can't say I don't think you would like it any better, but I think they changed some things for the worst in that version.
it's very possible that could be the case. I might consider trying the PS2 version to see how it compares, but it's not a priority for me by any means at all.
Nah, that's fair. And also, just as a side note, call skill issue yeah on me if you will, but fuck Colossus 12. The giant, like, gorilla-like one in the water. That one fucking blows. I actually ended up doing something that I wasn't supposed to do in order to beat it that felt extremely awkward, because I didn't know that you had to do an unobvious mechanic to actually get it right where you wanted it to go. So that fight could just eat my ass.
Oh, so it's a puzzle boss fight.
Technically, almost all of them are puzzle boss fights, to be fair. That one was just puzzlier than normal. That one was a Sierra, I should have done this 5 hours ago and now I lose type of puzzle.
That's part of why I don't like Shadow of the Colossus, is that all of the boss fights are puzzle bosses, and at the same time, even if you know what to do, you still have to execute it, and the controls are absolute shit, so it's a fucking pain to do it. I fucking hate it. Fuck this game. The thing that I remember about the controls is that they feel like a weird mix of simultaneously like stiff yet also loose. So they're kind of like a mix of the worst of both of those, and they never felt right to me at any point while playing. It felt like I was fighting with the designers more than I was with the actual game's challenges. I hate it. I hate it.
Well then, I guess we get to me then. I've never played Shadow of the Colossus, so I'd like to take a minute to rant about Castlevania Lords of Shadow. Since that's the closest I've come to it.
Go, please. I'd love to hear this.
I hate Lords of Shadow. I hate it so much. It is a Castlevania game in name only, and even that's not entirely accurate. It's like, I'm sorry, puzzles do not belong in Castlevania. Fetch quests do not belong in Castlevania. Spoiler alert, the Belmont is Dracula. That does not belong in Castlevania. It feels like... where's the Castlevania in there? I think the first part where you're fighting the werewolves in the rain was the most Castlevania I ever experienced in that game, because everything else after that's like Lord of the frickin' Rings.
Lords of Rings, though. I don't know.
Shadow of the Lords of the Rings of the Colossus or whatever. But I do remember the boss where you have to go ahead and climb up him, and that was a royal pain in the ass. And if that's what Shadow of the Colossus is like, I'll pass.
Yeah. I'm not sure you would actually like Shadow of the Colossus. Like, to be fair, the Colossus fights that are totally ripping off SOTC are certainly not done as well, but they're not super far off all the same, so I don't think you would like Shadow if you were to actually play that. So.
And Sharon, no, that is not the game on Switch. LDP, I'll say for the record, there are some 3D Castlevania games I don't mind. It's just that Lords of Shadow is hot garbage.
LDP, Legacy of Darkness is actually my favorite 3D take of Castlevania. It's certainly very flawed, but I thought it had more personality than the, while technically cool, relatively flat IGA PS2 Castlevanias, and it definitely felt more Castlevania-y than Lords of Shadow. Also, it had skeletons riding motorcycles. I'm always obligated to mention that.
That was actually kind of funny.
It's great. I love it. I don't care how anachronistic it is.
Didn't Bloodlines also have the skeletons on motorcycles or something like similar?
I don't think they're on motorcycles, but it did have skeletons wearing World War I helmets, and there's this one enemy that was like some sort of robot on wheels that would charge into you really fast.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Of course, that game did take place during World War I, so...
Right.
Bloodlines is so good. I love it.
Yeah.
It's really
But
cool. It's my second favorite Castlevania.
also,
choice.
yes, Eugene, I'm definitely dishing out some Castlevania Judgment over here.
Yeah, I never played Judgment, and like after turning Eric into a kid for some reason, like I'm good never playing it. What the fuck?
I think I rented that one, and it's a fighting game. It's okay. Very unusual take on the source material, and that's the most charitable thing I can say about it.
It's
All right.
not my thing. I will say that.
Have a good night, Tim.
I'll see you, Tim. Take care now.
Later.
Thank you for joining.
All right. So, Kate, you're up next. Which one you gonna do?
I'm gonna go with another negative hot take because I have a lot more to say about this one, and I'd like to try and get it out. So, my next pick is going to be Mega Man X4. For the record, I am a very big fan of Mega Man X as a series. I kind of like Mega Man in general, but the X and Legends sub-series in particular have always been near and dear to me. As far as Mega Man X goes, I really adore the Super NES trilogy. Mega Man X, Mega Man X2, and Mega Man X3 I think are all incredible defining experiences, both for action games and the Super NES as a whole. I really like Mega Man X3 in particular for its high level of difficulty, the wide variety of secrets defined in it, and the way that your experience with the game and story can drastically change depending on which order you tackle each stage, which bosses you fight with which weapons, which upgrades you seek out, etc. This even can lead to one of two different endings, which I think is pretty neat. On top of that, I just really dig the overall gritty, raw vibe that I get from the game. I think the soundtrack in particular plays a big part in that. It was composed by Kinuyo Yamashita, who, among other games, has done music for the original Castlevania and Power Blade on the NES. And I think Mega Man X3 is another highlight from her work. I just really like this game. So, with that said, I did not get to play Mega Man X4 when it was new. My family got an N64, so we didn't have a PlayStation or Saturn to play the game on. I remember spending years feeling a mixture of annoyance and jealousy that I couldn't play the newest Mega Man X game on my N64. It wouldn't be until years later, when my family got a PS2, that I was finally able to play Mega Man X4 thanks to backwards compatibility. So, I was excited to be able to try X4. I started it up, and everything about it just felt really off. It was clear from the start that this was a very different experience from the Super NES games, and it didn't sit right with me. Among other things, one of my main issues with Mega Man X4 is that it significantly tones down the difficulty compared to Mega Man X3. Having gotten used to Mega Man X3, X4 felt kind of like a joke in comparison. Even just from the start of the game, before you've gotten any weapons, I already feel like you're too powerful, and not much in the game is really a threat to you. As if the game weren't easy enough, the various upgrades you can find as X make it even easier. His helmet upgrade, in particular, makes it so that you can use each Maverick weapon pretty much infinitely, provided you stick with regular shots. And that almost completely negates the need for weapon energy, and I think that was a degree of simplification that was not needed. Then the arm cannon can have one of two upgrades, one of them being a plasma shot, which leaves behind balls of plasma in midair for a few seconds on top of whatever enemy it makes contact with. It absolutely devastates most enemies in the game, and it doesn't take much time to charge up at all. So, you're taking an already easy game and making it even easier? Okay. And another thing that I hate about the game's design is how every single stage in the game is split into two parts. After playing halfway through a stage, suddenly you teleport out of the stage, and you have to sit through a loading screen to see the second half of the stage. I find this a real pace killer, coming after the previous games where you never left the gameplay at any point after beginning a stage. And I also feel like the general tone and vibe of Mega Man X4 is off. This is more subjective, but I don't like the change in art style all that much in-game. and I especially don't like Mega Man X4's soundtrack. The gritty metal vibe of X3's OST is almost completely gone, as X4's OST is a much more synth-heavy soundtrack, and almost all the compositions sound melancholic or moody or something like that. It just wasn't really something I was looking for from the series, and I don't feel like it fits Mega Man X very well. Then there's other minor annoyances here and there, like the lacking localization. Like when you start Magma Dragoon's stage, his start screen references the quote-unquote irregular hunters, even though they're only called that in the Japanese version. They're the Maverick Hunters in English, but the localization didn't catch that bit. And there's the anime FMV cutscenes, which have a fairly awkward English dub. There's also the fact that X's campaign feels like an afterthought compared to how much more attention Zero's campaign got. About the only really positive thing I can say about Mega Man X4 is that Zero is fully playable for the first time in the series, and I guess that's neat for a change of pace. He no longer has an arm cannon for no particular reason story-wise, but gameplay-wise, relying on his beam saber for every attack helps him stand out in combat compared to X, so that's neat, I suppose. I think it's also marginally more challenging when you play as Zero compared to X, but even so, I still think the game is too easy as Zero. I just don't like what Mega Man X4 did to the series. Yet, practically everywhere I go online, Mega Man X4 often gets regarded as one of the best, if not the best game in the entire series. That is a stance I can never agree with. To me, Mega Man X4 tainted Mega Man X in a way that I'm not sure the series would ever really recover from. I don't like how different it feels in tone, or how watered down the gameplay itself is, so I do not like Mega Man X4.
I'd like to go ahead and say my piece here, because it'll be short.
Okay.
If you before you say Mega Man 2 was the best game and the series sucked after that, you already said that in the chat, bastard. I've heard it already. Okay, Jesus.
I wasn't even going to say that, Mike.
Okay, I'll shut up then.
Ha! Anyway, I gave the Mega Man X series a shot when they first started coming out in the Super NES. Even though I'd lost interest in the NES games after 2, because that was the greatest one ever made.
Hang on. Continue. I'll just manipulate the. No wait, that's yeah. Okay, yeah, let's go with that.
I will say, to a degree, I enjoyed the first Mega Man X game. And, well, didn't care for any of the other ones. So I never even bothered with Mega Man X4.
Alright. That's fair.
Eugene did ask, and I'm not sure who he's addressing here, what do you think of Mega Man 9? Personally, myself, I played the demo, was like, okay, nice, it's 8-bit Mega Man again. Still not crazy about it.
I like Mega Man 9. I think it's cool, but I do kind of wish that they stuck with not being a retro take, so to speak.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so whoever would like to go ahead and throw in their 2 cents about X4, go right ahead. Mike? Snarb?
This is another one I don't have a lot to say on. It was a game I really desperately wanted to play, but I also did not have a PlayStation, so I only actually just recently played it as part of the Mega Man X collection on Steam, which has its own problems. Notably, the game has lag and frame rate issues for no discernible reason, but it was still able to play the game just fine. And It's a thoroughly okay Mega Man X game. It has issues. I agree with a lot of the issues that you outlined there, Kate, but it's probably my third after X1 and X2. I can never decide which of the first 2 Mega Man X games I like. And then X3 follows after X4. I don't know why I didn't jive with X3. I need to replay that one. But I think I thought it was loaded at the time, and that the Maverick fights were way less interesting than 2's, because 2 gave a lot of the bosses really interesting arenas, like Overdrive Officers just being in that huge desert. Very cool, and that is something that X4 kind of brought back. They tried to make some of the boss arenas a little bit more interesting, and also add some gimmicks to them, like with Magma Dragoons. That one's very funny because you can bring a right armor into it, and he basically just eats it in like a few hits, and it's great. I love that. I'm not as bothered by the easier difficulty. I actually like some of the streamlining elements, like the fact that your weapon energy is restored between stages and even between loading screens. I feel like they could have actually probably just had it recharged maybe between stages rather than between, mid stages and whatnot, but I'm not really bothered by that. I like the helmet upgrade. I can finally use Mega Man's other weapons as much as I flippin' want. That is something I hate about a lot of Mega Man games, is that sometimes the boss weapons are only really useful in the boss fight. And the Maverick weapons in this installment are actually all pretty good or have some utility, with some exceptions. Some are more gimmicks, like web spiders, just mostly being to add an extra double jump or whatever to your repertoire. But I like it. It's probably my third favorite. I would not call it the best game in the series, and there's a case to be made that it's worse than the first three. I would say X3 is definitely the meatier of the two, and X4 has a lot of annoying gimmick stages like jet stingrays. It's like, why are both segments a flippin' jet ski race? Why did you do that? Why would you do that? And then you could miss the power-ups that you need in that stage too, and then you have to kill yourself, and it's like, again, why did you do that? Sorry, my alarm's going off there.
Yeah, that energy tank in Jet Stingray's stage is the most difficult thing to get in the entire game.
Yeah, that was awful. I think I game overed on that one, actually. Well, I had already beaten the stage, fortunately. I typically try to clear the stages first and then go back. I'm one of those people that tries to, mop things up afterwards. Okay. I know in one of the games, I think X5 kind of penalizes you for doing that, or one of the games does at some point.
Oh, yeah, X5 does do that.
Yeah, you kind of have to be careful with that one.
Okay, how about you, Mike?
Well, I am a big Mega Man fan, but the lion's share of that fandom does rest on the classic series. But I will also say that, the classic games, for better or worse, are, for the most part, so uniform in quality that I could see where some would call some games better and others worse. But at the end of the day, since Mega Man adheres to the formula that it does so strictly, it's like even a not great classic game is still better than a lot of action games out there. The X series I'm a little less generous towards, but only because that one is just so much more across the board in quality. The first Mega Man X is fucking amazing. That might arguably be the only one anyone ever really needs to play, and it might even be better than any of the classic games, depending on who you ask. And I think X2 is also really good. Occasionally I think it's even better than the first one, but I don't know, that kind of goes back and forth in my mind. X3 I'm not as fond of, but I still do like it quite a bit. It still feels like Mega Man X on the SNES, and I won't turn that down, even if it is a little bit cruftier. X4, however, I do actually like quite a bit, and admittedly more than X3, but I could see where Kate's complaints were coming from all the same. Jet Stingray's stage was booty, there's no question about that, but I think that the level design otherwise is still quite overall good, and there's some neat Mavericks in there, the stages look cool, it still plays like Mega Man, and it does dial back in some of the cruft that X3 had, so it does feel more straightforward. It does have some interesting gimmicks, although the fact that you have to speed run Cyber Peacock stage in order to get to the armor part there, I think that one's kind of a pain in the ass for what that's worth.
I think Cyber Peacock stage is one of the easiest stages in the entire game. I think it's an absolute joke.
Well, I do think the last segment can be a little tricky. I do think it's one of the more innovative levels.
It's really easy if you have the right boss weapon for it too, because you literally can just spam through everything with Split Mushroom's weapon.
Yeah, Skull Body, was it? Yeah.
Yes. Very cool actual ability if it's a little bit gimmicky, and the charge mode's actually pretty cool too.
Yeah, really neat weapon. I just think that it's a solid overall game that certainly took advantage of the PlayStation's
enhanced capabilities over the SNES, and it still plays like X to me, and it doesn't have the more obnoxious bullshit that X5 and X6 has. The PS1 trilogy does kind of invite a lot of comparisons to itself, and ultimately, compared to X5 and X6, X4 at least is a lot more beloved. X5 has its fans, but some of it is mixed, and I think that while its stage design is only a minor step back, it's still very playable, but your mission control, Alia, keeps interjecting with messages that you cannot skip whatsoever, and it's the most annoying bullshit ever. And X5 also has this mechanic where you can still do everything right and still get the bad ending just due to a random chance.
That's an important life lesson, actually, that you could do everything right and still lose.
Thank you, Captain Picard, but I'm trying to play a video game here, so plug it. That's what I think. And then X6 is just a mess. I think I just call it a Kaizo hack of X5. It's just got the donuts. If anyone played X6, you know the fucking donuts and Blaze Heatnix's level, and it's so bad.
I feel like that was supposed to be more of an epic boss fight, because it looks like it's supposed to be something curled up and they couldn't finish the animations in time, so it's like, fuck it, donuts, 5 times.
It's called the Nightmare Snake, so I think it was trying to be an Ouroboros or something, but they forgot to draw a head in it, and it just looks fucking stupid and weird. Okay. But, yeah, X4 I do like, if not just because it's better than the ones that came after it. It was the last good X game, in my opinion. Afterward, it just got X8 reclaimed some glory, but it was kind of played out by then all the same, so... Oh well.
So, Levon has recommended we check out the Mega Man Battle Network series. Now,
Battle Network is a series that I've never actually gotten to play. I remember wanting to play the first one when it was announced in Nintendo Power when I was a kid, but by the time I was looking for it, it was already out of print, and the stores were trying to sell me Battle Network 2, but I didn't want to start with the second game, so I just never got around to Battle Network.
Battle Network, I actually thought was stupid back in the day. I thought, what is this? Why are you putting this Pokemon shit in my beloved Mega Man? Get away. I'm nicer on it now. It's just that, I'm a lot pickier about playing RPGs because I barely play them at all anymore, but in hindsight, the series did at least try to do something wildly different, and notably it was a completely alternate continuity for once that actually wasn't related at all to the classic series, which X-Zero and even surprisingly Legends had ties to the classic series. So I respect Battle Network for being more its own thing, and I would like to play the first game someday, but I genuinely don't have anything to say about any of the games because I've never actually played any of them, so that's all I can say there.
I don't do RPGs,
I've only played the first Battle Network game. Wait, Battle Network, is that the same thing as Mega Man.exe or .x or however you're supposed to say it?
Yeah, .exe. I think that was like its Japanese name or something. I forget.
Okay, yeah. So I played the first one of those, and I didn't get super far because, it was via emulation and I was just testing games out, but it's one I would like to go back to because it is actually an interesting kind of twist on the Mega Man formula. The battle system actually kind of fits, and it's kind of neat overall. And there's also like reinterpretations of some of the characters. It has a lot of 2000s era reboot energy to it, like you were seeing with like He-Man and TMNT in the like distant video game form.
And coincidentally, it had a few ties to the show Reboot, at least in its overall setting. I thought there. I didn't watch Reboot, but it's like, it takes place in the computer.
I loved that show. I never did see it was like the third season that they produced later on. I never did get to see that one, but I loved the original show a lot. So
I would like to get on that show someday. I also did want to point out that LDP noted that his own hot take is that if you stripped away all the Kickstarter baggage, Mighty Number 9 is not a bad game. We all actually agree with that one. Everyone I've spoken to feels the same way, and I do to an extent as well. So
I like Mighty Number 9. It's definitely lacking in polish, and there are a few things in it that I think are actually pretty terrible. But overall, I think it's a fine enough game. but I can understand why people dislike it, partly because everything outside of the actual game itself, from the development to the way the Kickstarter was handled, etc., was a trash fire.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very unfortunate. And also, Retro Levon noted that they're not big on Mortal Kombat. I actually think that's not that spicy a take nowadays. Not a lot of people are huge on Mortal Kombat nowadays. At least not the classic games. They haven't aged very well. They look a lot more gimmicky. They are nowhere near as robust as Street Fighter or most of SNK's fighting games. So
Yeah, but you're just describing the way they always have been. They were just new and controversial at the time.
yeah. Yeah, pretty much. They went more for shock than they did substance, and it worked back then, but, you know, holding up as an actual game nowadays,
MK2 is legit good, and to the degree Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is also pretty good, at least.
Yeah, I'll give you that. The series in its heyday, before every game sucked until the 2011 reboot, but I guess that's its own thing.
Yeah.
So
that said, let's go and move on to Snarb. And I'm curious as to which one you're going to pick to do.
I hate to leave you guys in suspense, but I have to take care of something real quick, so I'll be right back.
Okay.
Wah, wah.
So we can...
Rob's pick.
Nah, I don't want to get into that Snarb being here. So let me go ahead and recap for those who have joined us since the beginning of the stream. As you can tell, this beautiful background here was not done by Betty. These are my crappy MS Paint skills. This is why I'll never be an artist.
I actually have to go get a drink quick, so beer being my throat.
That's fine. I'll talk about my lousy art.
Do tell.
Yes. I added the squiggles for stink lines, I guess. I don't know. I just threw them in there. But, you know, Snarb said they look like movie theater carpet, so that works. The had the ghost of Old Man Graves from the 20th Prime. Yeah. And I had to throw him in. And, of course, you have, given his personal thumbs up, you have our muscular friend Joe Piscopo. And screaming in terror at the next bad hot take that's coming along would be Batfleck from the Zack Snyder Justice League movies, or whatever they were. I never saw those, so I couldn't tell you. And then we have other stuff in there, like Krang saying, I have 205, whatever that means. Little your winner thing from whatever that stupid racing game was. And the melted skull from Ninja Gaiden on the Master System. And you think I did really well, Sharon? Oh boy. You've looked at Betty's backgrounds in the past, right? I mean, those are professional grade. This is like a first grader playing with crayons.
Hey, there's something to be said for the merits of outsider art, I guess you could call it.
Al, I have to agree with you on that. I do like Legend of Kage in the Famicom.
That's a fun one, yes. Mm-hmm. I like it too.
And, of course, you have also the Outer Space Potato Man from Renegade. And also, Betty did look at the background and gave it her personal thumbs up. Thought it was the greatest thing she'd ever seen. And she was not being sarcastic. She thought it was hilarious.
Well, so I guess Joe Piscopo managed to do at least one thing right in his terrible, terrible life, so...
Yeah, he contributed to this roundtable. Maybe we'll have more backgrounds like this in the future, I don't know. But the whole thing, just don't take this whole thing seriously.
Yeah.
And for those who weren't here for the intro to the stream, it was Buffins the cat. Here, take a look.
I am back, apparently, for Buffins the cat.
Yes. He was winner of the title of Cat with the Most Appealing Expression in 1958. He seems like a good kitty. I would have liked to have met him.
Snuggle baby.
Yep. All right, Snarb, you're up.
Oh gosh, do I go with the spicier take, or do I go with the one that is meant to champion a much underappreciated game here.
Well, you could go with the one that you're going to hear from me about, or the one that I know nothing about.
Oh gosh. Okay. I believe I will actually go with my other choice on this one. And I think only maybe Mike will be able to discuss this one with me. But Hexen is the best Doom engine game, hands down.
Aw.
Yeah. Hands down. What?
Yeah, hands down.
Oh.
Even accounting for modern Doom engine games and classic Doom engine games.
No. Better than Heretic? Really, man?
Yes, actually, and there's a number of reasons for that.
Switches. That's my reason. Go on.
Hang on
so
a second,
let's
guys. Hang on. Before we go on, I just want to address something Sharon asked. She wanted to know if Joe Piscopo is a killer. Well, Mike, do you want to field this one?
No, he is a terrible comedian who got popular for some reason in the 80s before he became a right-wing fuckbag. But the medium of comedy. So yes, you're not far off.
He might have killed someone with some really bad jokes or something, for all I know.
And he even guest starred in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation for some reason. The second season had problems.
Yes, it did. Okay, Snarb, go ahead with your Hexen talk.
Okay, so this actually, Zafiro actually asked a question here. Better than Ashes 2063? Yes, and for one good reason. This is the first point. Modern Doom as we know it would not exist without Hexen. And there's a good reason for that. Z-Doom, which was originally just an enhanced Doom port, slowly added, or very quickly, I can't remember the exact time frame, features from Hexen, notably the ACS system. I think it's called, it's some kind of scripting system, Action Script, I believe, something like that. I forget the exact name that ACS translates to, but Hexen introduced scripting to the Doom engine, actual proper scripting that allows for a variety of things. You could have earthquakes, you could have levels transform, puzzles. It also added so-called poly objects, rotating geometry that allowed for swinging doors and like just all sorts of really interesting things. Sliding doors as well. There are a lot of puzzles that involve you sliding things around, and that's a big thing there. I don't think people realize is that without that game, Modern Doom might not exist in the same way because so much of Modern Doom is built on that backbone. Initially ACS and polyobject and enhanced level design, and then later scripting systems that were bolted on top of that. I believe Decorate was actually the next big revolution in Doom modding after that point, but right off the bat, the technical features that were added to the engine were very impressive, and this predates Duke Nukem 3D as well. It has a lot of the same scripting and story and puzzle elements as well. Secondly, it has an actual villain that is there, that has a presence in the game. I think their name is Korax. They're this giant,
Korax was the big bad.
They're like this giant alien demon dragon thing, and it's a shame the boss fight itself is kind of lame because otherwise their design is so awesome, and they taunt you throughout the game. You know, talking about how they're going to grind you into dust and do all these other wonderful things. So it's really cool having the cinematic element added to the to that engine or in a game from that time period, and it doesn't really interfere with the action either. Like it's like a very quick cutscene and it sets the mood, and that leads to the next point. The atmosphere in the game is amazing. It is the only game I have ever seen or ever played that feels or plays like I imagine a Boris Vallejo or Frank Frazetta painting would play like. And very few other games have nailed that fantasy look and fantasy atmosphere and have done it in a way that's actually really fun and interesting. It also introduced, I believe, it was one of the first RPG light or light, it introduced light RPG elements to an FPS game, notably each of the characters you play as has slight differences. I think Hexen 2 took it to a greater degree by allowing for leveling, but you actually have different armor and armor classes, among other sort of things. There's a lot to say about it, but I'll say this. Every time I install any modern Doom port, I always install Hexen first, and I can usually get a few hours into the game and not even realize it. It's just a very amazing atmospheric game. And that's, again, not even going into the fact that you can play as 3 different characters who play vastly differently from each other and have different sort of approaches and balances. And the difficulty level and what monsters you fight and other factors actually vary based on which character you play. You might encounter certain areas or certain puzzles before another character might. It's just a solid all-around package in every way. And I kind of lament that, some people might compare it to, like Dark Souls or something, like a proto version of that. And it's like, yeah, I could see that. But there's very few games that capture that 80s heavy metal fantasy sort of theme. And I lament that. Like, I think more Amiga games lean into that, but they're not as good as Hexen. Like, not even close.
So, I am curious, though, Mike, what your rebuttal there is, because you were very mad at me suggesting this one.
Even you have to admit, the first hub in the game is total fucking shit.
Yes, that is my only complaint with it. The first hub is completely and utterly pointless. It's basically a long hallway with a bunch of doors that lead to these really abstract, kind of strange elemental puzzles. Some of it's okay, like the ice one is kind of cool and the fire one's kind of cool, but then you have the Guardian of Metal, which is probably the absolute worst stage in the game. And that's a bad thing to throw up front because the introduction stage sets up so much. And then once you're past the 7 portals, the atmosphere in the game just really picks up. I believe the one right after that is Shadowwood, which is just this really cool looking fall themed like area with ruins and like desert temples and a foggy swamp, which introduces one of my most hated enemies in the game. Are they just called the Serpents? I'm trying to remember what they're called. They have a name, the Fishmen. I hate those guys so much, but they're such a great enemy. Like, the enemy design in the game is pretty good, too, just like it was in Heretic. All the enemies require a different approach.
I want to say they were called the Stalkers, the guys that jump out of the water, you mean?
Yes, Stalkers, that's it.
That's them, yeah.
I'd like to go ahead and rebut here, if I may.
Yes.
I saw a screenshot of Hexen once. Go on.
Did you feel like a rat in a maze just looking at it?
At the time, I hadn't had too much experience with FPSs, so I can't say that I did. I just saw that it didn't look like you were carrying a big gun around.
No, actually, one of the classes is almost exclusively melee. Their first 2 weapons, they first start off with their fists, and their fists are so ridiculous that they can make some of the starting enemies explode and have their guts shoot out. It's great. And then they get this big, powerful axe, and then a hammer, which actually throws out tiny exploding hammers, and then a sword that flings like flames everywhere. The fighter class is probably the weakest. Linear warrior versus a quadratic wizard, I believe, is the trope nomenclature for that, but it's still very fun. Like, the fact that there's an emphasis on melee in the game, especially with the fighter and the cleric. Like, the cleric's probably my favorite class, because
he's the one I beat the game with.
Yeah, he starts off with the mace. The mace is probably the weakest starting weapon in the game, but then he immediately gets the serpent staff, which, it should be noted, most of the weapons in the game actually have multiple functions or have dual firing modes, but it's more intuitive than that. Like, for example, the serpent staff either fires out 2 bolts of poison, that kind of snake around, hence serpent staff, or if you get close to an enemy, it actually drains health from them, and it becomes a chainsaw, basically. That kind of, it's really cool, the balance there. And it's like most of the weapons have functionality like that, or are very interesting. Like, the mage gets a sort of an ice spell that's like a ice shotgun. But if you're very close to an enemy, it's like a touch spell from like D&D. It basically instantly freezes most of the enemies in the game, or at least the starting enemies. Or otherwise, it's just a very powerful melee attack. It's actually the only melee attack the mage has, interestingly enough. I don't think any of his other weapons have that functionality to them, but it's just such a cool game, the way things interact with each other, like the atmospheric elements. Like, you'll walk into an area and like leaves will actually blow in the wind, or lightning will strike a tree. It just has a lot of
atmosphere and personality to it that is kind of lacking from the other Doom Engine games. Like Heretic had a little bit of that, and so did Strife. Strife actually is a little bit better. That one's a little bit more like a comic book kind of sort of thing going on, 90s comic book, fantasy, sci-fi kind of thing. But there's just something about the way that Raven could like really bring out the essence of something, you know, like an engine by just adding little bits of scripting and flair, particles, you know, special effects, whatever you want to call it, or just making the combat satisfying, like giving it a weight to it that I don't really feel like the other Doom engines quite get or do. Like, no one is going to complain about the melee combat in Hexen because they nailed that, especially with the fighter. Whereas melee combat in other Doom Engine games is basically crap. You don't want to bother with it. So, props there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Hexen does do some cool stuff, but I don't like that you hit a switch in one area only for it to do something in a completely different map and you are not told what it does. So you just kind of have to bumblefuck around until you find out, oh hey, this vaguely differently colored wall is open now. Why did that happen?
That's mostly a problem in the 7 portals. It improves as you get further on, and you kind of make a mental map of where things are. Usually it's like, okay, you need to get like this gear from the castle tower in order to start the clock, but you need the clock handle from the wizard's key for whatever. Yeah, it's a bit puzzle-y or bit, you know, like key hunting, but I don't really mind it as much in Hexen for whatever reason.
Well,
probably because the keys actually have meaning and value and actually can change the environment.
Well, for me, Hexen is cunting defined, so I said that again. Jesus.
Yes, you did, Mike.
I'm terrible. I mean, it might be a little bit hypocritical to slander the entire game because the first hub is just so terrible, but every time I have tried to earnestly replay Hexen, I just get stopped by... I don't know if I've just... my patience has just rotted off or whatever, or skill issue now or whatever, but I just don't feel the need to play on after I get lost between the ice and the metal maps, and I just like... No, I'm good.
That is a fair criticism. Like, I feel like you could actually just skip straight to Shadowwood, or make maybe the very first map into a much smaller hub that, you know, maybe gives you your second weapon.
I will grant you that the game does get better, but still, the best Doom game aside from that, the Doom Engine game aside from that, I wish you had more weapons and or the Tome of Power was at least in this game. That's at least one thing that Hexen 2 does better, and I don't want to necessarily say...
I think that's like the only thing that it does besides making the classes slightly different by giving them abilities and levels. Everything else is kind of worse.
I don't know. It's tough. It's a real back and forth. I don't want to say Hexen 2 is necessarily a better game because for everything it does more cool than the first one, it also does something really stupid. But I don't know. I just find Hexen a theoretically cool game, but one that's just kind of tedious in practice. I much prefer its elder predecessor, Heretic, which is pretty much medieval Doom, and it doesn't do nearly as much to distinguish itself from the Doom formula as Hexen does. But I'm a simple bitch, and I think I like it because of that, so...
Although, if I had to have another spicy take, I think Heretic is better than either Doom or Doom 2. I'm sorry, but
totally
again...
No, that's totally fair.
Raven Software knew how to make an engine sing and how to give a game punch and personality to it. Like, Doom is good, but there's just something about like all the extra stuff they added to Heretic that makes it more interesting, especially with the maps and the graphics and other sort of things. And Hexen just takes that to the next level. I'm not sure if it's the very first FPS game to have like full scripting and other sort of things, but that it's shocking it didn't make it stand out more. I think a lot of people were like you; they were turned off, you know, either by that first hub or the kind of drastic change in gameplay. You know, with you have 4 different characters. And they each only get up 4 weapons, so you're kind of like just kind of, you know, trying to figure out how to use those in their best situation and other kind of stuff like that. It can get repetitive, but there's just some X factor to it that I can't, you know, like it keeps bringing me back. And as Severo mentioned, she's not sure why there's not a lot of level mods for it. Truthfully, I think it's just because of how how much the game is sort of a complete package. It's not kind of like abstract randomness like Doom was, or even Heretic. And it's so much more grounded. Like you can only really make castles and other stuff, and making custom textures is actually one of the hardest things to do for Doom. Besides enemy sprites, like there's some other issues there with like inflexibility, with like adding new stuff to the game. Like Hexen is kind of the most rigid in terms of modding. Like even Strife kind of allows more wiggle room because the scripting system in that is significantly simpler, and it's easier to replace certain items. Like the game doesn't care if you replace a key weapon in the same way it does with Hexen. The multiple classes complicate things, that kind of thing too. I'll say this: I'm a sucker for Hexen in the same way I'm a sucker for beat 'em up. I just like games that let me play as a bunch of different dudes or dudettes, or even everything in between.
Wait, a sucker for which game? It sounds like you said BMO from Adventure
Beat 'em
Time.
ups, sorry.
Beat 'em up, sorry.
I'm a sucker for beat 'em ups. I love games that have multiple player classes, and it's one of the very few FPS games to do that isn't Borderlands, and I hate Borderlands. That would almost be a hot take of its own, but
That's fair. I think Hexen does a lot of cool things. It's just, I think it's lesser than the sum of its parts. I know that's a really dumb and trite phrase, but I don't know how better to put it.
Well, in that case, Kate, do you have anything you'd like to add about Hexen?
I've never played Hexen or Heretic. I do happen to really like first-person shooters, and I think the Doom engine is cool, so I might give them a shot at some point.
Okay.
And I saw a screenshot once. So...
It also had ports to the consoles. I think the N64 port's the best, but the rest, they're still pretty skippable overall. It's not the best way to play it, and you don't have to play it that way anymore. It's not like Doom 64 or the PlayStation Dooms, where they actually kind of do more with it and change it up a little bit.
I'll just add a quick appendix to this, if I may. Snarb, your opinion on the Hexen expansion, Death Kings of the Dark Citadel?
It's kind of crap. Some of it's good, though.
Okay.
Some of it's actually pretty good. I like the village stages and stuff they add to that. There were only little hints of that in Hexen, which is kind of weird, but it's kind of more Hexen, but worse.
I can never get very far in it. It's like, oh no, this is 7 Portals, but shittier.
Yeah,
so,
kinda.
Yeah, unfortunately.
All right, guys. I think after we do my next one, we're going to call it for the night. After all, the last 2 roundtables ran super long, so...
No worries.
But will there be room for hot takes too? We just don't know.
Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Maybe.
Maybe we just do sparring matches where it's like you do like good idea, bad idea. One person has to champion one thing and the other person has to tear it down.
That's a potential possible. So, anyway. So as far as mine, do I go with the predictable one or the really predictable one?
Oh,
that's the question.
I think I know which one you're going with, or you might go with, and I'm just going to say this: IGN already had that opinion long before this hot take.
What, are we talking about God Hand?
No, you'll understand. I think it goes with that one.
Okay.
Well, frankly, I'd rather tear into something that I don't really care for. So we're going to go with the really predictable one.
Okay.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes, and I was just saying, IGN was the ones who started the Sonic is never good discourse.
Okay.
I was thinking that one before IGN existed.
Okay.
It's as old as almost the modern internet, though. That's like the coldest of cold takes, sir. I will have to take your hot take card back from you.
Wrong. I predate the internet. I was there. Don't cite the deep magic to me, which I was there when it was written. Well, okay. Sonic has turned into a juggernaut over the years. I mean, they just had 2 major motion pictures, which are huge successes. And those did make a lot of money. Not as much as Mario did, but they still cleaned up. So, I'm going with the original game, which I remember the first time I ever saw it, it was a screenshot in Egypt. One screenshot. And they commented that it seems similar to Wonder Boy.
Wow.
Oh no, no!
Yes.
That must have been a very big surprise to the world's #1 Alex Kidd fan. Or wait, did you say Wonder Boy or Alex Kidd? I'm sorry, I'm kind
Wonder
of zoning
Boy.
out a little bit.
Wonder Boy.
Ah, yes. No, it's not quite like Wonder Boy.
Nothing like Wonder Boy. But, you know, it came out. They gave it rave reviews all across the board. A friend of mine picked it up. Played it and was like, oh, this looks good. Sounds great. One thing I will say, as far as a pro, the soundtrack is phenomenal. It controls just fine for basically having one button. So, but the more I played it, and I did finish it, the more I began to realize how bored I was with the damn game. It was, when it wasn't boring, it was too fast to keep up with. Led to a lot of unnecessary deaths. And on top of that, did I mention it was boring? And also, it did probably the unforgivable sin. It ushered in the extreme critter genre that dominated 90s console gaming.
Are you saying you're not a fan of Bubsy, sir?
I am saying I'm not a fan of Bubsy. I'm even less of a fan of Awesome Possum.
Okay, well, Awesome Possum is the absolute dirt worst dick dog shit of that fucking craze, so...
Well,
You
what about
must
Arrow
hate
the
Rocket
Acrobat
Knight
and Zero?
Adventures.
Oh, sorry.
Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel. Yeah, the spin dash. They had to go ahead and make him even faster in the sequel, right? I understand it's the point of the game is speed. But it's like playing Roadrunner's Death Valley Rally on the Super NES, which is a lot slower, but still, you're just kind of all over the place with that. And frankly, the only good mascot platformer that ever came out was Rocket Knight.
Rocket Knight Adventures is fucking excellent, so...
That is
Yes.
definitely one of the best mascot games ever, yes.
I will also give a
love
nod
Rocket
to...
Knight Adventures.
It's such a great game. I will give a slight nod to High Seas Havoc, even though it does share some of Sonic's DNA. But there's enough unique about it that really sets it apart. So, but yeah, Sonic. Smug blue bastard.
He does not approve of you not touching the controls.
That's true. So, yay, Sonic the Hedgehog came and just completely dominated consoles in the 90s to, you know, sure, we still got the occasional game of something good, but it was just like, okay, so we have another mascot platformer this month. Oh, and there's another one 2 weeks later. Oh, this one's an anthropomorphic turd or something. I don't know.
Hang on, I got a sidelined LDP for my favorite comment of the night now. Bubsy died for your sins as a result of excessive fall damage.
That's a good one.
Did you know he doesn't like heights? Did you know that?
Kudos.
Oh, yeah. And also, what could possibly go wrong?
Everything, apparently. I, of course, wrote about Bubsy for Rob's Memoirs of a Virtual Caveman, and I was suckered into all the advertising they threw at that game, and while I still do feel somewhat hornswoggled, Bubsy's not the worst of that whole craze. I can almost appreciate the first game on at least an ironic level. But Bubsy 2 and afterward, no, blow off. Not great.
Hey, how about that Bubsy 3D, huh?
Yeah, no. Not Lanny Manella's most finest hour in her very long career. But
Bubsy 3D is the one that I most want to try.
I have actually played it, and it's
experience.
It's playable. I actually didn't have a bad time with it. I thought, hey, this is kind of weird or kind of playable for an early jank 3D platformer. Shame it came out the same year as Mario 64 and Quake.
All right, look here, LDP. I cannot change faiths. I am a long-standing member of the Church of Burger Time, and that's just always how it's going to be. And
anyway,
just to address something that Sharon said, don't take it personal. These are all just our opinions. And I do hate Sonic Spinball with a passion, yes.
that's fair.
Fuck
That one's a little
Spinball.
ungood, yes.
That one's off. Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
Fairly on point.
Terrible. Anyway, so yeah, I don't do Sonic. It's just no. So who wants to go first?
I think Snarb would have the most to say against you, but
I would, but I'm curious if anybody else wants to go first.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
I've never been a Sonic fan. I remember when I was a kid, I was a pretty insufferable Nintendo fangirl. So at that point in time, I just kind of hated Sonic just because Sonic was the anti-Nintendo thing in the 90s.
Wait, hang on, Kate. Mike, you were a Nintendo fangirl at the time?
Yeah.
Hey,
Sure.
That's cool. Go ahead, Kate.
Heck yeah. Okay, so later on, I got to try Sonic, and like having played or dabbled in a few different Sonic games at this point, I think as far as the franchise in general is concerned, I just don't care for Sonic. I have no attachment to animal mascot platformers, aside from Rocket Knight Adventures being really good. I will say that I do think Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on Genesis is pretty fun, but beyond that, I'm not super interested in Sonic. And it's like, even as someone who's recently been getting into more stuff on the Sega Genesis and the TurboGrafx 16 and whatnot, I've been finding that there are a lot of really great games on those systems and from various developers and publishers on there. So I've been exploring a lot of non-Nintendo stuff, and I think it's been good to expand my boundaries. But I still don't like Sonic. I just don't care about Sonic.
I'm right there with you. Okay, who's next?
Well, I will go on to say that I'm also not a huge Sonic fan, but I have gained more of an appreciation for him over the years, to an extent, but it's like I run with people who are dyed in the fucking wool Sonic fans who can discuss and will frequently discuss everything about Sonic and his friends' lore and mythology, like, you know, everything to do with all the fucking comics they made. And I'm like, why do people talk about this so much? What blood are you trying to extract from this stone? I don't get it.
Are you talking about like the Archie comics?
Yeah, stuff like that. The good comics, the really shitty ones done by Ken Penders, etc. It's
I'm kind of there with you because I know a lot. I think some of the same people who talk about Sonic all the time, and I never have anything to contribute.
Yeah, and when the subject gets on Sonic, like, does your brain just kind of go dead and wander off into some dark space elsewhere in the internet? Because that's just kind of the... Like, I'm not going to begrudge or belittle them for liking what they like. You know, if they're huge fans of this shit, then, you know, more power to them. I mean, I can discuss Yakuza / Like a Dragon lore for hours on end, and that's also a Sega series, so I'm not necessarily criticizing. It's just they fall into Sonic conversation so much, and my mind always just farts out. I'm like, how can you discuss so much of this? All that being said...
Because I like it.
Yeah. All that being said, I do at least like the Genesis games, and the recent Sonic Mania is really good. I have come to appreciate more old-school 2D Sonic lately, for what it's worth. The first game does have problems, and the second one does as well, but I'm a big fan of Sonic CD and the Sonic 3 / Knuckles duology / combo / whatever was the whole interesting thing they had there. And yeah, Mania is really good, and, you know, just because I liked the Dreamcast back in the day, I actually played through Sonic Adventure. I thought it was weird, kind of crusty at points, but it was interesting. That was technically the first Sonic game I ever beat. Never got around to Adventure 2. I know it made some changes for better or for ill. But then after that, like when the series just really dove full on into its long-going 3D phase, I just could not keep up. I tuned out. It
has its moments.
Yes, sorry. It does have its moments. So, I would say I'm a bit more of a Sonic fan than Rob and Kate is, but a really mild, fair weather one. I'm not going to go for some series I love. I even go willingly play some of the bad installments just to compare them to the others. I'm not so fond of Sonic that I'm going to go hunt down a copy of Sonic 06 for the Xbox 360 and just play that to say I played that. I am not going to fucking do that, at least.
Yeah.
So, that's my stance on Sonic. It's alright. It's just not my thing. Beyond the Genesis era, for the most part.
Just before we get into Snarb's rebuttal, I do want to say, much like with graphic adventures, there are exceptions to every rule. In my case, there is actually one Sonic game I actually like.
Do tell.
The first Master System game.
Yeah. I actually grew up playing that one too. I never beat it, but... Well, playing it on the Game Gear, but...
I need to try that one.
It's pretty cool. Oh, thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that.
And, I do like when there's actually an FM sound patch for the Master System Sonic, which actually makes it sound better, in my opinion. But I know a lot of people are divided. So,
I gotta play that like that. That'd be cool, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Especially that second stage. I forget what it's called. But that music, was all done by Ancient, if I remember correctly.
Oh, Yuzo Koshiro's outfit. Very nice.
Yeah, so the music he came up with for the second stage, that's some good stuff. And it sounds even better in FM. So,
Rad.
Given that, Snarb, you're up.
I'll start off by saying the Game Gear and Master System Sonics are actually pretty good, especially the spin-off Tales Adventure. If you haven't played that, you probably should. It's actually an interesting little sort of like, it's not quite a Metroidvania, but it's like a puzzle platformer a little bit with some action elements. It's very fun, but...
I keep confusing Tales Adventure with Sonic Labyrinth for some reason. I keep forgetting which is the good
Sonic
one,
Labyrinth
which is the
is
bad
one of
one.
those that's not... I haven't actually played it, so I can't really say if it's good or bad. Some people like it, swear by it, others hate it.
My bad.
Which is kind of the opinions of... It's kind of the Sonic series in a nutshell. I am actually on the opposite end of this. This is one of my maybe favorite franchises, or at least in the top 3. And that some of that has to do with just what my first video game system is and which games I got for it first. The first system I ever owned was the Sega Genesis, and that Christmas I got, I think, 2 games, or 2 or 3. No, I got 4, but one of those was Sonic the Hedgehog, and another one was Strider. And those kind of defined my taste for a long, long time. And I wish I could explain why I like Sonic. Like, it's either you love it or hate it, or kind of just side-eye it and not quite understand it. And I find it has a lot to do with the game's physics. And some of that's just, I hate to say it, but I don't think people quite grok it. In other words, they are playing it wrong. Because you see, Sonic, while he does move fast, he is a hedgehog. And do you know what hedgehogs do? They turn into a ball. Do you know how Sonic turns into a ball? Well, in running, you hit down. Most of the game can actually play itself. It's very interesting if you set it up right and set up his momentum right. There's a reason why later games add pinball stages, because it's basically almost like a pinball platformer. It's really interesting once you realize that. Yes, there is some fine-tuned platforming. Sometimes the on-the-ground physics aren't the greatest. He can be kind of, have a lot of inertia. And, like, they like to do that in the original games, the original 16-bit games, is kind of try to vary it up, have tight platforming sections with, like faster sections. And it works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. But overall, it's a very solid package. I kind of fell off the wagon with the 3D games. A lot of classic Sonic fans did, but I do actually like most of them. I like Sonic Adventure, Adventure 2. I don't really like Heroes. I, shockingly enough, actually like Shadow the Hedgehog. Yes, it's a hedgehog with a gun, but it's probably the closest thing we'll ever get to a 3D Strider, because it's really cool. You can get a sword, you can be grinding on a rail, hopping around, slicing dudes up. It's really strange. It's a gameplay mechanic that would work better if it wasn't a Sonic game. What else? Sonic Generations was okay.
I think I played bits of Colors. Colors was pretty good. I've not played Unleashed. I think that one's actually kind of bad. I think I've played Black Knight and the Secret Rings on the Wii. They're playable. They're kind of an interesting tech demo. Mania is great. No complaints there. I'll say this, actually. Here's my hot take. Sonic CD is overrated, and I would love to hear people stop talking about that game and stop ripping its awful jump sound and putting it in every ROM hack ever. It is the worst jump sound in any game ever. Any Sonic game, any game, period. Why do people do that? I just don't get it.
You can't say that because you're also not a huge fan of Sonic 2 either. You have to pick one or the other. That's how it works.
I can hate them both. I can think they're both overrated. Sonic 2 is the better of the two, though. I can actually stand to play Sonic 2. It's just an overly bloated game. Kind of needed a save system or at least passwords. It kind of suffers in the similar way to Super Mario Brothers 3, but on a smaller scale because, you can get through that game faster. But the stages are just so annoying. Like, the first stage is fine, but right after that you get, like, Chemical Plant. It's like, yes, I want toxic water in my second Sonic stage, and then having to climb up this really long pipe filled with pink goo as you have to carefully platform underwater. And a lot of water stages in Sonic suck. Both in Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. They fixed that with Sonic 3 by making most of the stages have water in them and only very, very briefly. And then Sonic and Knuckles has no water in it at all. It's a completely dry game, and you combine that with Sonic 3 and you get the best experience ever with the least amount of water.
Yeah, Sonic 3 and Knuckles had really great stages. The only one I'm not so hot on is Sandopolis Act 2, but other than that...
Okay, that one does have that puzzly bit where you can get stuck in the loop. That's actually the worst part. But I love Sandopolis. That's my favorite set of stages in any Sonic game. That and actually, shockingly enough, Oil Ocean. A lot of people hate that stage. That's actually one of the best stages in Sonic 2. It just feels right for that game. It also comes after Mystic Cavern Zone, which is also probably the second best one in the game. That's a good stage. But yeah, I'm a huge Sonic fan. I've played a lot of the games, even when I probably shouldn't have, including the regrettable spin-offs. That includes Knuckles, Chaotix, and Shadow the Hedgehog. But I get why people don't jive with it. Like, it seems like you're one of two kind of platformer people. You're either kind of more on the Mario end, or you're kind of more on the Momentum/Sonic end. And you either grok it or you don't. I can actually play both games. I actually appreciate and love both series, but I do lean more into Sonic. There's just an energy there to it. There's also one other thing I really appreciate that it did, is that it kind of is the first truly 16-bit game. It took a lot of games off the grid, much like Strider did. Like, there's so much rolling terrain in there. There's not a lot of flat level, stuff in there, like flat levels, so to speak. And that's especially to a Sonic 3 and Knuckles. They really vary that up. And Sonic Mania as well. And I just appreciate that because a lot of modern platformers have gone back to being very square and on the grid. That's the one thing I lament about the 16-bit generation, is that they didn't learn anything from games like, Donkey Kong Country, Earthworm Jim. I guess Rayman kind of technically counts. It was started on the Jaguar, which is kind of a really weird console. I'll count that as a 24-bit console. Let's be real here, given the way that thing worked.
Yeah.
And it's just, we haven't really gotten that sort of sense back. That was another thing about Mega Man X I actually really enjoy, is that, again, a lot of rolling organic kind of terrain, or at least angled terrain, to kind of mix things up. Regular Mega Man can be very square, a little too square.
That's fair.
Well. Anything else you want to add, Snarb?
Other than being a super fan of the series, it being one of my top franchises, along with like Doom. Trying to think, I have a lot of franchises I could probably go off on, but I'll just stop with those two. I disagree, but I also understand your opinion on it. I think the histrionics from the IGN era of Sonic was never good really ticked me off, because people are saying the same thing about Donkey Kong Country, and I'm sorry, but you're wrong. They are both really good franchises.
I love Donkey Kong Country.
It's so
In fact,
good.
my third pick was going to be Donkey Kong Country 3 as a positive.
Yes, that's the best game in the series, too.
Dyer, would you care to elaborate on your end?
Dyer's trying to keep his mouth shut over here.
He just kind of mumbled that out while eating something.
No, I was saying it out of the corner of my mouth.
Oh, okay. What was it that Homestar said? The double side whatevers are allowed, or I forget.
Yeah.
You
Well,
were saying Snarpoo?
I forget what I was saying. I think I was actually drinking water. It made me sound like I was going to say something, but someone actually mentioned Ookie Spooky Outsider Occult October Odyssey. That's a great name, by the way. Mentioned the Sonic fandom being able to produce lots of fan games. Yeah, actually, that's a really nice thing about it compared to, like, say, Mario, where Nintendo will sue you into the ground over and over again, and then you have to release your game via clandestine means. I am still mad about SR388. I am still very mad about that.
yeah, that's fair.
Also,
wait.
Prime knows exactly where I'm coming from right now.
Wait, SR388, is that the same as AM2R?
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. Sorry. I got the game confused with the planet it's set on.
Yeah, no, that was...
We did eventually get a remake of that by the same people who made Lords of Shadow, but...
And ironically,
Yeah.
they actually did pretty good with it. And then they made Dread, and that was actually great. So... I think that Mercury's team just dropping the ball on Castlevania was just due to Konami's own dark descent at that time, because they were starting to fall into degeneracy around the early 2010s.
Yeah,
but
I don't
that
even think
is
it was supposed to be a
different
Castlevania game in the first place.
It
Yeah,
wasn't.
that's another thing. I doubt highly that it was. Wait, this isn't the Lords of Shadow cast. This is the second time we've done this, and in fact, you wanted to bring it to a close soon. So
Yes. So we are going to go ahead and cut it off here. So
that Kate revealed the third one she wanted to talk about. Did we at least want to reveal the third ones that we were considering?
well,
Yeah, might as well, just to tantalize people.
or we could save it for the next, the sequel to this,
That's very true. You
We
could.
could.
because we can each pick another game to go with the one we didn't cover tonight, and then go from there.
All right.
Also very true.
Yeah.
I suppose.
So that way we'll have a positive and a negative, or
Wait.
maybe a negative and a positive, or
Yeah,
Whatever.
both of mine were negative tonight. I was grumpy.
yeah, mine were too.
Yeah.
But
Zarb is the only fundamentally decent one among us. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you
Why
for
is
balancing us
that
out,
exactly?
Snarb.
yeah,
Oh, because I had 2 positive and 1 negative? Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah.
so that said, I do want to address the announcement again that I addressed at the top of the stream. The Dyer and Betty videos are still on hiatus for the time being. We do intend to keep streaming in some form or another. As far as YouTube streams, we're definitely going through the end of the month. We have a Halloween stream planned. And after that, we'll have made our decision by then as to how we're going to keep going. So, might stay on YouTube, might move to a podcast format. Hard to say. We're checking out options anyway. But, let's see. Books are still coming. I know I say that every time, but they are. It's just moving very slowly. So,
I like that Tarantula song.
yeah, moving very slowly. Very slowly.
Slower and slower and slower, yeah.
Yeah. Creeping, rusty meat.
Meat.
But,
It's true.
yeah. I would like to, since, I'm hoping everyone who's listening in understood this is not a stream to be taken seriously. So,
As you can visually see by our indicator there.
yeah, by
On
my
the screen.
my lovely MS Paint skills there. Yes, again, background is not a Betty production. So, I'd just like to close with a poem that kind of caps the whole thing off.
Oh?
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum. What might be right for you may not be right for some. A man is born, he's a man of means. Then along come two, they got nothing but their genes. But they've got different strokes. It takes different strokes. It takes different strokes to move the world. No one's going to hit me with the crickets? Come on, guys.
I mean, I actually, that's different strokes for different folks, correct?
That's actually a theme song to the TV show Different Strokes.
Yeah, I actually like that show.
I've never seen it.
There's another verse too, but I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, so join us on October 28th for the Halloween stream. And yes, Prime, you're right. That is what Willis was talking about. So,
Thank you all for joining us.
yes, thank you all very much.
Yeah,
For
this was,
tolerating my opinions.
and mine too.
And mine.
And Kate's. She's not going to apologize for them. She doesn't have to.
And we do like Castlevania here as long as it's not Lords of Shadow.
I might have to play more of that so I can make that another positive pick here, because I actually was liking what I was playing. But like, I could actually get into this a little bit.
All right.
Rob, would you play the Mr. Burns clip for Snarb there?
Judas! All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and cut it. So,
Alrighty.
all right, thanks again for coming in, and glad you all enjoyed it. So,
See you later.
we're out.
Take care, y'all.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye-bye.